The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Jeffrey Sachs, Building the New American Economy, Smart, Fair, and Sustainable. This is from Chapter 13. It's titled, Restoring Trust in American Governance. More than any other threat facing America is the collapse of civic virtue, meaning the honesty and trust that enables the country to function as a decent, forward-looking, optimistic nation. The defining characteristic of the 2016 presidential election is that neither candidate was trusted. The defining characteristic of American society in our day is that Americans trust neither their political institutions nor each other. We need a conscious effort to reestablish trust by making fair play an explicit part of the national agenda. We have already noted the collapse in public confidence in the federal government. The collapse of trust in each other is equally striking. For decades, pollsters have asked America whether most people can be trusted. And for decades, the proportion answering in the negative has been rising. There are probably two main reasons for this downward trend. The first is the sharp widening of income inequalities since the 1970s. The second is the widespread feeling that those at the top of the heap in income and power regularly abuse their wealth and influence. Donald Trump's relentless assertion in the 2016 campaign that the system is rigged, a claim that resonated widely despite the obvious irony that Trump himself had been a relentless rigger of the system. The system is indeed rigged for the big corporate interests, such as the drug companies that set drug prices 1,000 times the production cost. It's rigged for the large IT companies, such as Apple, that deploy egregious tax loopholes that enable them to park funds overseas in tax-free overseas accounts. It's rigged for the hedge fund managers who take home hundreds of millions of dollars in pay and then face a top income tax rate of 20%, far below what others, vastly poorer Americans, must pay. It's rigged for the investment bankers that deliberately cheated their clients and then walked away with a mere slap on the wrist, if that. And the fact that the Clintons parlayed public office and a family foundation into a vehicle for vast personal enrichment was not lost on an unhappy and distrustful electorate. Considerable social science research in recent years has given laboratory evidence to an ancient truth that power and wealth do indeed corrupt. Consider a fascinating psychology experiment recently published in Nature, a leading scientific journal. The employees of a major international bank were divided randomly into two groups, a control group and a treatment group. Both groups were given forms to fill out at the start of the experiment. The control group was asked general questions. The treatment group was asked questions about their role in banking. Then each group was asked to flip coins and report honestly how many heads they flipped, being told that a greater number of heads would lead to a higher monetary reward. The control group reported that they flipped around 50% heads, an honest report. The treatment group claimed to have flipped around 58% heads, a dishonest report that exaggerated the proportion of heads flipped. The conclusion? Simply by being reminded that they were bankers by filling out the form about banking, the treatment group was spurred on to cheat. The psychologists concluded that the business culture of banking within that representative bank was a culture of cheating and greed. One feels that America is like that today, especially at the top. This is an age of impunity, a time when the rich and powerful get away with their misdeeds and are even lauded for them in some quarters. Donald Trump met the accusation that he had not paid income taxes for years with the response, "That makes me smart." Goldman Sachs CEO Lloyd Blankfein met the charge that his bank had cheated its customers with the response that they were, quote, doing God's work. Hedge fund manager John Paulson was celebrated on Wall Street for his cleverness in conspiring with Goldman Sachs to bilk a German bank out of hundreds of millions of dollars. The leaked emails show how the Clintons mixed their private, public, and foundation activities and simply confirm for many unhappy Americans that this is how the system works. The United States Supreme Court has shamelessly fed this impunity. In the infamous Citizens United case, the Supreme Court shockingly equated anonymous corporate contributions to political campaigns with free speech. The court demonstrated that it had no realistic sense of how such corporate contributions have undermined the legitimacy of our political system. In a more recent case, the Supreme Court overturned the conviction of former Virginia Governor Robert McDonnell, who had been convicted of fraud and extortion for taking gifts from a businessman promoting his health products to the state. McDonnell walked away free from a shoddy and egregious abuse of office. I've noted repeatedly that these other high-income countries, do not face these same trends. The U.S. pattern of rising inequality, falling trust, and increasing money in politics is not simply a reflection of the times or an inevitable side effect of democracy in the 21st century. Indeed, while many other countries are caught in a similar spiral of rising inequality, falling trust, increasing corruption, many others are not. Canada, for example, has successfully avoided these extremes, even though we share a common North American economy and a 3,000-mile border. Decency and trust can be maintained even in our complicated, globalized times. While there's no magic wand to restore social trust in the United States, there are important guideposts for citizens, businesses, and public officials. I suggest 6 key steps. First, we should acknowledge the dangerous hold of the lobbyists and the super rich on the political process. While many incumbents in office today will not sever their ties with their campaign contributors, citizens should sever their ties with politicians who rely on such contributions. While many, so the book is Building the New American Economy, Smart, Fair, and Sustainable by Jeffrey Sachs.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Happy Monday. Lindsey Graham is saying, the Republican Party maybe should return Steve Wynn's money. I think that there's a larger story here. Okay, just to put this in context and bring you up to date on what's going on. The Koch brothers have announced that they are going to spend $400 billion to rig they wouldn't use the word rig, to win for Republicans in the election that's happening this year. Now, we have 50 states in the United States. $400 billion is $8 billion per state? No, let's see, 5 goes into 40. I can't even do the math. 8 times, yeah. Yeah, it seems like. Anyway, so $400 billion. If you had $100 billion, that would be $2 billion per state. Yeah, that's $8 billion a state. So they're going to spend, obviously it won't be $8 billion in each state, which is even worse for probably New York and California, who knows. But can you imagine if any liberal billionaire was to say, if I've been saying billions, I meant millions. If any billionaire was to say, yeah, I'm going to spend $8 million in your state. I've been saying billions, excuse me. It's millions. So it's still a mind-boggling amount of money. It's just a mind-boggling amount of money. So Steve Wynn, just back up a little bit. Harvey Wasserman was like this, Democratic donor, major Democratic donor, a left-wing billionaire, if you will, and was accused of sexual assault. And so Democrats all said, that's it, give back the money or give it to charity or whatever. At the encouragement of the Republicans, you'll recall. I mean, it was like, right after the election that, as soon as this came out, in fact, here's the RNC has been noticeably silent on what they will do with the money raised by Wynn, despite quickly calling on the DNC to return contributions from Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein. I said Wasserman, excuse me, Weinstein. It's been a busy morning. The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and several Democratic lawmakers, including Senator Chuck Schumer of New York and Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, returned or donated Weinstein's contributions shortly after news broke of the allegations. But the Republican counterparts have not made any such announcements about Wynn's contributions. So here we have, this from CNBC.com. Koch brothers network to spend up to $400 million for the midterm election cycle, including $20 million to sell the GOP tax law. So let me ask the question. If both parties agree, or at least Lindsey Graham from the Republican Party agrees, that taking money from billionaires who assault women is not a good thing, and so they're giving the money back. What about taking money from billionaires who are assaulting the environment? What about taking money from billionaires who are funding groups that deny climate change? We have droughts all around the world right now as the result of climate change that drove revolutions, that drove the Arab Spring. The war in Syria is in large part was caused by, but 5, 6, 7 years ago, as the desert moved south, about 1 million people, subsistence farmers in northern Syria, lost their farms to the desert and moved into the major Syrian cities, producing an explosion of homelessness, causing the social safety net in that country to creak and groan, and people to go out in the streets and protest, which Assad responded to by shooting people. Boom, revolution. From climate change, from burning fossil fuels. We had, Puerto Rico get taken out. New Orleans get taken out. Hurricane Sandy, New Jersey, taken out by hurricanes that were made worse by global warming. There's no dispute about this any longer, or at least no consequential dispute. Even in meteorological circles, the extraordinary cold that is gripping the United States periodically. When we were living full-time in Washington, D.C., it was just a few weeks ago. It was absolutely bizarre, the cold in Washington, D.C. Why is this? Because as the Arctic warms and loses its ice cover, and it's doing both, it's warming several times faster than the rest of the planet. As the Arctic warms, the ability to maintain the jet stream is falling apart, and so the jet stream is getting all loopy and drooly. And as a result, Arctic air is literally drooling down over North America and other parts of the world. And as that happens, of course, it speeds up the warming there. So the guys who, revolution, even earthquakes. I mean, as Greenland is getting lighter, as millions of gallons of water every second are flushing away because they're melting off, and they're getting little micro earthquakes and stuff around Greenland. So droughts, fires, California, wildfires. Right now, California, Southern Oregon, insanely dry. Freezes, floods, hurricanes, revolutions in the Middle East and around the world. It's happening in Bangladesh. It's happening in India. It's happening all over. So shouldn't we collectively in the United States say, it's terrible that Weinstein and Wynn has been accused. Well, both of them have denied the accusations. But it's terrible if they assaulted women that they did, and their money. We don't want their money. Isn't it time to say it is at least equally terrible that these guys are assaulting all life on Earth, women and men, and children, and everything. By funding climate change denying, and by funding a Republican Party that denies climate change, so that the profits of Koch Industries and ExxonMobil, who is also doing this, and I don't know what kind of donations they're making, but to say this money is just as toxic as Harvey Weinstein or Steve Wynn's money. Period. Full stop. Don't take that $400 million, Republicans. Don't take it. And how about the $800 or $900 million from 2 years ago? How about giving that back? Do we really want climate change deniers buying our politicians, funding our politicians to the point that the politicians will lie about science in order to help their donor class? And now the Kochs are also, obviously, you know, they've made these, I mean, the two of the richest guys in the world, made all this money, you know, largely with fossil fuels. They've diversified tremendously since Daddy, you know, let them inherit the oil company. But now they're going to spend $20 million to convince us all that the tax breaks that the billionaires got are good for you and me, too. Coming to a TV screen near you soon. This concerns me. How is it that we get so worked up and so moral, appropriately so, about the assault of women, but we're not apparently concerned about, or at least our news media is not concerned about, and our political parties don't seem to be all that explicitly concerned about, certainly the Republican Party not at all, about the assault of our world, the assault on our planet that is being perpetrated and propagated by fossil fuel billionaires and fossil fuel companies. Isn't it time to say no to fossil fuel money right across the board? And have the midterms been bought? Is this $400 million statement from the Koch brothers, $8 million per state? This is a lot of money. Does this mean that forget about the blue wave? What do you think? We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And in just a minute, is it appropriate to lock up women who are drinking when they're pregnant? Stick around. And welcome back. So have the midterms already been bought? It seems to me like that's pretty much what's going on. And it ain't a good thing. And here we have Senator Lindsey Graham saying, yeah, we should do of ourselves what we ask of the Democratic Party if these allegations have merit. Oh, if these allegations have merit. So let's wait a year and find out? I don't know. Walt in Rapid City, South Dakota. Hey, Walt, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
Yeah, I want to talk about, you know, it seems to me that we've really had a class warfare going on for probably 40 years. And it seems like the rich guys are just unleashing a weather weapon on the rest of us. I don't know.
I don't think that was their intent. I really don't. A lot of these guys are invested heavily in the insurance industry, which is taking a huge hit from it. I think that although, the reality apparently is from news reports that ExxonMobil knew about this back in the 70s.
Well, that's one thing I'm basing my theory on, I'm real nervous. But,
I think they just said, we'd rather have the money, screw the planet.
Well, yeah.
Now, whether Koch Industries knew what ExxonMobil knew is an open question, but nobody can deny right now that they know it.
Yeah, well, I really think they all knew it, and that's the reason they're denying it. And
I think that may well be the case, and it's the reason why ExxonMobil for years and years was funding climate denial when they knew that they were funding a lie, and yet we're still using petrodollars, petro billionaires' money. I mean, it's astonishing. It's really astonishing. Well, thanks for the call.
Right.
Good point, and thanks for watching Free Speech. Alex in Edison, New Jersey. Hey, Alex, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. Or good afternoon. I'd like to disagree with you about something you said. Maybe you know more about the topic than I do, so if I get educated, all the better. You said that in terms of carbon emission, or to paraphrase you, that electric cars are better for the environment. And I kind of disagree with that. I think, well, for one, you need energy to make the cars run. It doesn't matter if that energy is coming from the internal combustion at the engine or like in the coal plant.
No, but if that energy is coming from solar power or wind power, it does matter. It matters a lot.
Yes,
or from hydropower like we have here in Portland.
Well, if you look at the whole United States fleet, 80% of the energy we produce is from fossil fuels. Now, so if you want a good energy policy, it's not how you consume the energy. I think it's how you produce it.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. If you want to make an argument against electric cars, probably the best place to go is rare earth minerals. But you know, I see this whole process as being a transitional one. But anyhow, Alex, we're running out of time. Thank you for the call. We'll continue the conversation. It's 20 minutes past the hour.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity,
resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Should we declare as a nation that fossil fuel money is just as corrupt, that money coming from climate change deniers in the fossil fuel industry is just as corrupt and tainted and poisonous and destructive to our republic, to the United States, as is money from people who have a long history of sexual, assault or, assault, I guess is the word. And it seems to me like, yeah, at the very least, we should be drawing that equivalence. So I'll be picking up your thoughts on that. And then I wanted to also raise this is fascinating. A prosecutor in Montana is actually putting out the word to the police department and to the people of Montana. He's the prosecutor in Bighorn County in Montana. He has announced a, quote, immediate crackdown on any expectant mothers who use drugs or drink alcohol. This is by Catherine Pearson over at Huffington Post. Harris encouraged the public to report instances of mothers to be drinking or using drugs to the sheriff. Now, I get it. The rate at which Montana babies were born exposed to narcotics increased tenfold from 2000 to 2013, from fewer than 0.8%, fewer than 1 per 1,000 live births to 9 per 1,000 live births. That's about a tenfold increase. That's what's that? 1,000% increase. It's still a small number, but it's not a good thing. And nationwide, the incidence of newborn withdrawal increased 300% between 2000 and 2013. But, writes Catherine Pearson, research and experience show that treating pregnant women punitively can do more harm than good. An already vulnerable population of women, she writes, may be discouraged from seeking prenatal care or help stopping their drug use. An abrupt discontinuation of opioids during pregnancy, as would happen when an expectant mother is jailed, can lead to preterm labor, fetal distress, and even fetal death. And she compares this to a handmaiden's tale. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and numerous other major medical groups condemned Bighorn County's proposed crackdown. They said it would be ineffective and harmful. Lauren Jansen says there really is zero scientific evidence that this will work. She's the director of pediatrics at Johns Hopkins Bayview Medical Center for Addiction and Pregnancy. She said anytime you try and separate the well-being of the fetus from the well-being of the mother, you get into a kind of slippery slope. The fetus relies on stable maternal physiology to develop properly, and if you put a woman with an addiction disorder under constant stress, if you put them in jail, if you deny them treatment, if you deny them medication, that's not going to be optimal for the fetus. So, you know, it seems like on its surface, this is more of the idea that women are just baskets to carry men's babies. We're back to, you know, the pre-Van Leeuwenhoek theory that sperm was the homunculus. Prior to about 300 years ago, maybe 400 years ago, I'm not sure when Van Leeuwenhoek, you know, the whole microscope thing. Prior to the microscope, the belief was that sperm was little tiny fully formed humans that got deposited into women's bread baskets where they cooked for 9 months and popped out, you know, fully formed human. And all, you know, in fact, there were efforts back, literally 500 years ago and longer, to try inserting that sperm in other animals to see if they could be used as well as women, you know, try cows. Didn't work out all that well. They couldn't figure out why. Why is it? If, you know, I don't even want that picture in my mind. But anyway, you get my point. And this is this whole idea that a male-dominated, patriarchal, hierarchical society for thousands of years, for the 9,000 years of modern Western civilization, what we call Western civilization, has been totally male-dominated. And the idea, I mean, it's only in the last couple hundred years that we even knew that women were contributing to the process, that half of a baby is their DNA. And so, you know, this whole idea had been used to perpetuate this notion that, you know, women are just little, you know, toaster ovens. And this is extraordinarily destructive. So what I would say is, fine. We want to stop women from using drugs and alcohol during pregnancy. I'm totally down with that. When we ran the Salem Children's Village, we had numerous children come through with fetal alcohol syndrome. I have seen it. I've seen it repeatedly. It's a horrible thing. You do not want children born with fetal alcohol syndrome. But instead of criminalizing the women, we should be supporting them. Why don't we, you know, at the very least, you would think that these so-called pro-life Republicans would say, okay, if a woman becomes pregnant, she instantly qualifies for Medicaid. Instantly. Instantly qualifies for food stamps if she's, you know, below the poverty level, if she can't work or shouldn't work because of her pregnancy. We're going to support her. Instantly qualifies for some kind of housing support. Put into place the systems that will cause her not to feel that she has to turn to drugs or alcohol to deal with the crisis of life in America post-Reaganomics. Anyhow, that's my rant. I'll pick up your phone calls on these topics and others right after the break. Stick around. It is coming up on 9 minutes.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of your calls, my thoughts, and the news of the day right after this.
And welcome back to our Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading From Devil's Bargain by Joshua Green, the subtitle Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storming of the Presidency. This is from the afterword, the very last chapter. It's titled Kali Yuga, which in Hinduism is when the earth goes into a phase of destruction. In the shell-shocked aftermath of the election, President Obama, looking shaken, appeared in the White House Rose Garden to deliver public remarks intended to project a sense of calm. A sense, really, that the basic stability of our country remained intact. Sun is up, Obama said. I know everybody had a long night. I did as well. Had a chance to talk to President-elect Trump last night, about 3:30 in the morning, I think it was, to congratulate him on winning the election. End of quote.
The next day, when the two men appeared together in the Oval Office, it felt as if the world had slipped through the looking glass. Trump quickly named Bannon his chief White House strategist. Republicans controlled every branch of government. With Trump's ability to defy every political norm, anything seemed possible. Who could argue otherwise after what had just transpired? And yet, within days of his inauguration, Trump's White House was plunged into chaos and scandal from which it has not recovered and may never. Bannon, the imaginative reconceiver of U.S. politics, hung streams of paper listing Trump's promises from the walls of his West Wing office. His strategy, as always, was to launch furious attacks, this time to, quote, shock the system, end quote, and rapidly reorient the federal government in a more nationalist direction. He called this, with what I took to be intentional irony, a shock and awe approach to asserting Trump's power. But Trump's flurry of activity quickly ran into problems. There was his executive order, sprung a week after his inauguration, banning immigrants from 7 majority Muslim countries, which set off nationwide protests and was blocked by the courts. His firing 2 weeks later of National Security Director Michael Flynn for contacts with the Russians. The collapse of his first major legislative initiative, a bill to repeal Obamacare. His firing of FBI Director James Comey. And the swift descent of the West Wing into a viper's nest of backstabbing and leaks. This quick turn toward a crack-up was hardly unforeseeable or even altogether surprising, but it contrasted sharply with the success of a candidate who had dominated his opponents, shaped news coverage, and shown himself to be all but impervious to the forces that overwhelm other politicians. Bannon, whose wild gambits in the campaign had invariably paid off, seemed to run out of magic tricks when Hillary Clinton was no longer a target. The government wasn't as malleable to Trump and Bannon's aggressions as the Republican Party and the cable news channels had been, and they found themselves consistently thwarted and undermined by the courts, by right-wing hardliners in Congress, by their own inexperience and Trump's errant tweets, and by the bureaucracy they were now overseeing. The crises these failures precipitated in the White House cost Bannon much of his influence and soon threatened Trump's presidency. While still early in his term, the possibilities that Trump's most ardent supporters once imagined for his presidency already seem to be mostly foreclosed. I think there are 3 main reasons why Trump's administration has so quickly fallen into disorder and confusion. Number 1, Trump thought being president was about asserting dominance. Just after he'd locked up the GOP nominations, Trump said something to me that crystallized his view of politics and explains, to my mind, much of his subsequent difficulties. Quote, I deal with people that are very extraordinarily talented people, he told me. I deal with Steve Wynn. I deal with Carl Icahn. I deal with killers that blow these politicians away. It's not even the same category. This, he meant politics. This is a category that's like 19 levels lower. You understand what I'm saying? Brilliant killers. Trump was equating politics with business and the presidency with the job of being a big shot CEO, a killer. He filled the upper ranks of his administration with people of a similar mindset. Gary Cohn, Wilbur Ross, Steve Bannon, aggressive, domineering men accustomed to getting their way by dint of their position. None had government experience, nor did many others in the West Wing. So none anticipated the problems this approach to governing would cause. Trump's self-conception as the all-powerful apprentice boss blinded him to a fundamental truth of the modern presidency, that the president needs Congress more than the Congress needs the president. Trump's domineering instinct served him poorly, since most members of Congress are secure in their jobs and accountable mainly to their own constituents. And it backfired disastrously when Trump fired Comey after he refused to submit to a pledge of loyalty to his boss. Number 2, Trump ran against the Republican Party, Wall Street, and Paul Ryan, but then took up their agenda. Populists often struggle to govern, but Trump scarcely attempted to lead the populist revolution that he promised. In May, he told me he would transform the Republican Party into a workers' party. But while he kept voicing populist shibboleths, the legislative agenda he took up was the standard conservative fare pushed by Paul Ryan. During the GOP primary, Trump has shrewdly sensed its weak point, Ryan's desire to finance tax cuts for the rich by cutting programs like Social Security and Medicaid, harmed the party's white blue-collar base. Trump told me he'd made this point to Ryan directly. He said, quote, there's no way a Republican is going to beat a Democrat when the Republican is saying we're going to cut your Social Security and the Democrat is saying we're going to keep it
and give you more. The book is Devil's Bargain by Joshua Green, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storm of the Presidency. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Neil McCabe has announced, or apparently, I'm not sure if he announced it or leaked it, NBC is reporting that Neil McCabe is going to be stepping down as the #2 guy in the FBI, or at the Justice Department. And we'll see where this goes. The news is developing, and I'll fill you in more as time goes on, but that seems to be the strat. The big question, of course, is going to be who replaces him. All right, this is, yeah, okay, he's the deputy director of the FBI, excuse me. And, yeah, he was acting director of the Bureau for a while. He's already expected to leave, though not this soon. And CNBC says the story is developing. Please check back for updates. So we will do that. I hadn't seen it at the top of the New York Times or the Washington Post yet, but I caught the chyron on NBC. Anyhow, Susan in Chicago Heights, Illinois. Hey, Susan, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call. I love your show, by the way. I love that you talk about the environment and without all the silliness and everything. Anyway, what I want to bring up is something that came out in the news late last week. Not the major news yet. We'll see today if it's on later. But apparently the administration is going to get rid of all the clean air, EPA clean air regulations. There's no reason for that except he's giving tax break, money, all the money that's going to come into his rich fossil fuel CEO buddies. They're going to trash the planet and run with the money. Right, and well, and they're transferring $400 million of that money to politicians and to support Republicans in the election that's coming up this year. So, yeah, it's not a good thing, Susan. It's definitely not a good thing. And so, do you think that we should be collectively treating fossil fuel money as toxic, as being as toxic as money that comes from people who are accused of sexual harassment or sexual assault? Absolutely, even more so, because all of us need clean air, even Republicans. They need clean air and they need clean water. This is just insane. Yeah, you would think that Republicans would figure that out, but I think right now the money and power thing has got them all confused. Susan, well said. Thank you for the call. Mark in Las Vegas. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hi, yes. Hold on one second. I want to take it off of speakerphone.
Sure.
You still there?
I am.
Oh, sorry. I'm trying to get to it. Can you hear me okay?
I'm not going to wait that long. I'm sorry. John in McKees Rock, Pennsylvania. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Tom. You think about all the topics you covered through the years you've been doing this.
Yeah, John, by the way, thank you for being there and not being on speakerphone when you first came on.
Yes.
For people who are listening, if I sounded brusque just a moment ago, Arthur, our call screener, always says to people, please, don't be on speakerphone when Tom puts you on. It's impolite, it's not so much to me as it is to all our listeners. It just sucks up the show. And my apologies to you, John, for stepping on you. Anyhow, go ahead.
Well, Tom, again, you think about everything you've covered, all the topics through the years. What has really gotten resolved? I mean, we have it's like if you lived 100 years ago and created a book, wrote a book of the future, I don't think none of us really will want to be in the period we are now. All the coverage is from polluted air, polluted water, endless wars, rigged elections. I mean, and nothing's really getting done. We can talk about this all we want. The only way, this is a constitutional matter. And I think, the Supreme Court, even though they're controlled by the Republicans right now, it's the only way you're going to ever make change in this society, into our country.
I'll try it again.
We are at a crisis. We need the Constitution, and we need the Supreme Court to step in at this moment in the United States to save our country, to save our government.
Well, the problem is, John, the Supreme Court is now dominated by right-wingers who have, in most cases, been nominated by people funded by fossil fuel billionaires.
Well, can anyone?
Neil Gorsuch is the worst. I mean, Neil Gorsuch's mom, Ann Gorsuch, was the head of the EPA for 3 years under Reagan or 2 years, and had to resign under a cloud of controversy. And she was devastating the environmental rules to the point that William Ruckelshaus, who was the EPA administrator under under Nixon, said, you know, this is a terrible thing. You know, the Republican Ruckelshaus said Ann Gorsuch is destroying the environment. She had to leave. Her son is now on the Supreme Court.
Can he be fired? Can
No.
any of the Supreme Court justices? Well,
No, they can be impeached by Congress, but that's it.
Okay, so Congress can fire them.
Yeah, but good luck. I mean, there's never even been, to the best of my knowledge, a bill of impeachment drafted against. Well, maybe there has been, but to the best of my knowledge, it's never been seriously adjudicated, and it's never happened.
Then you need people in there that will make it happen. You need
See,
people
what should have happened was that, talk about shutting the government down, is that the Democrats should have shut the government down in the last year of the Obama administration over the Republican obstruction of Merrick Garland's nomination to the Supreme Court. And Merrick Garland, by the way, was Orrin Hatch's nominee. Barack Obama wanted somebody who would definitely get Senate confirmation. He didn't want to deal with, you know, the Republican obstruction. And so he reached out to Orrin Hatch, who he considered to be a reasonable and honorable Republican. You know, surprise, surprise, he was wrong. But in any case, Orrin Hatch said, you know, yeah, this guy Merrick Garland, he's a good middle-of-the-road guy that Republicans and Democrats can both agree on. So Obama nominated him. He's not a progressive. He's not a Sonia Sotomayor or Elena Kagan. He's like Anthony Kennedy. I mean, he's right in the middle. And still, Mitch McConnell says, no, I'm sorry, the fossil fuel billionaires have told me that we've got to have somebody who is going to, you know, and so we get Ann Gorsuch's son, you know, who's even to the right of Ann Gorsuch.
Tom, there needs to be online petitions about what's going on to try to create a widespread awareness of these issues. I mean, the mainstream media isn't covering really hardly anything anymore. It's Trump every day on mainstream media.
Well, plus they all have interlocking boards of directors, and the mainstream media depends on their advertisers, and that $400 million that the Trumps announced that they're going to be giving to influence elections to get more Republicans elected so that they can get even more tax breaks and more deregulation. That money most of it is going to be spent on television commercials, which is going to benefit the so-called mainstream media and cable media.
And the masses are being brainwashed every day.
Sure. Well, but the media is not going to point it out, you know, because it's their bread and butter. So, you know, I guess there's no way the Koch brothers are going to finance this show, so I can talk about it. I don't know what their thinking is, but this is the way it's going. John, I need to move along, but thank you. You made your point very well. I appreciate it. Jim, and you did it quickly. Jim in Arlington Heights. Hey, Jim, what's up?
Well, Tom, I really need your help. I have 300 contacts on my computer, and I'd like to send something to my conservative friends. Like the GOP is not the same as it was. They started out, and I need a poop sheet. Starting out what they started out with, doing away with the ethics law. You know, that's what they wanted to do. Then they let the coal companies pollute the streams or something. And I don't remember. And nobody knows all this stuff more than you. And if we could get a poop sheet and send it out to our friends, you know, on what the Republicans have done in the last year.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we could change the whole system here. You know, I'm getting apoplectic.
I understand, Jim. I feel the same way myself frequently. And in fact, we're going to have Johan Hari on in I think the third hour of our program today to talk about dealing with depression and all that kind of stuff. Maybe the second hour, next hour.
Well, do you know what I mean?
But I do. And you know, there's really kind of two different issues. And one is that, you know, how do you influence Republicans people who think that they're Republicans how do you help them realize that the Republican Party, unless they're part of the 1%, is not acting in their interest? And you know, and then the second issue is, you know, here's all the terrible stuff that the Trump administration has done so far, and there is a confluence between those two, a mixing of those two, but they can also be two separate things. In terms of influencing your Republican friends, your conservative friends, I would argue, I would suggest that you would go to the writings of the anti-Trump Republicans. You've got a lot of Republicans who are coming out now and saying, no, we don't want, we don't want anything to do with this. And look at Joe Scarborough's last op-ed in the Washington Post just a couple days ago. He went off on a rant this morning against Republicans. He's like, the Republicans are doing this, and it was like, whoa. And so,
Tom, we're not going to get the word out. If you made up a poop sheet and we could get a hold of it with one click, we could get it out to 300. And
let me kick the idea around, Jim. I think a comprehensive list. There was one a couple of weeks ago. In fact, I printed it out. I was going to do a rant on it. It was like 130 things that the GOP has done to screw the average person just since Trump was put into the White House, the problem was the list was so long. It was like there was no way I could even do it in an hour on this program, and people would just go, their eyes would glaze up. There's so much stuff, and so I think it's a matter of picking the highest level things. Scott Pruitt taking apart the Environmental Protection Agency and destroying our environment. You've got.
Well, you could pick those out better than anybody.
Yeah, Ryan Zinke over in Interior. They're destroying our public.
Give you a job, Tom. And
I got it. I got the assignment, Jim. Jim, thanks a lot for the call. We will be working on this. Stick around. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 45 minutes past the hour, 15 minutes before the hour. More of the news of the day, your calls, and my take on all of this in just a few minutes. Should America consider tainted money from the fossil fuel industry to be as bad as money from sexual harassers?
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And my question is, how can you say that there's any doubt about this? And welcome back, Dave in Armstrong Creek, Wisconsin. Hey, Dave, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, I was listening to a commentary this morning on MSNBC, and Donald Trump was being interviewed by someone after that Davos conference, and he was asked a question about climate change, and he stated that he thought that the ice caps were expanding and that the world was actually cooling. And
right. This was the interview with Piers Morgan.
Yeah, in all fairness, I believe it was Stephanie Ruhle came right back out and said, no, these statements are totally false, which kind of encouraged me a little bit because you don't even hear the words climate change come out too often. And I think the mainstream media has really should be immediately, talking against these kind of statements that he makes because, and I know Fox News will never pick this stuff up, but and this was
Well, what it is, Dave, is it's a classic example of taking a little truth and turning it into a giant lie. The reality is that in Antarctica, there are parts of Antarctica, substantial parts of Antarctica, that are actually experiencing more snow right now than they have historically. And so the ice pack is increasing in Antarctica. But the reason why is because of global warming. You get more snow when you get closer to 32 degrees. And typically Antarctica is much colder than that.
But I think he was referring to the polar ice cap.
Well, Antarctica is the South Pole. So, yeah.
So anyway, it just, I think the mainstream media has a duty to dispute things that are just totally false.
Right, and yeah, you're right, and they've been good about doing it in some cases, but not in this one. Well said, Dave. Thanks a lot for the call. Jeff, watching Free Speech in Rogers, Arkansas. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Dr. Tom?
Good. What's on your mind?
I read an article today in the Washington Post about the evangelicals supporting Donald Trump, and I was found it really disturbing because they was comparing like Donald Trump to Jerry Swaggart, and like they
Jimmy Swaggart,
the moral majority and all that. Well, what are we going to do about this? Are they going to, like have these religious right take over, make this a theocracy, and they're going to do away with all the social programs and give the money, to churches to distribute to whoever they want to.
Well, this is one of the things that I never saw covered in any of the news stories about the GOP tax scam, and I keep intending to track it down, and my days keep getting away from me. But Trump had said that he was going to put into the GOP tax scam the specific repeal or repudiation of the Johnson Amendment from the 1950s, which said that which said that nonprofits that had a religious purpose could not engage in politics and maintain their nonprofit status, or any nonprofit for that matter, any 501c3. If they engage in political activity, they lose their nonprofit status. And whether that got blown up in the tax bill or not, I'm not sure, but that's the thing that the evangelicals wanted. The big megachurch preachers, they wanted to be able to support the local politicians who would support them, get the local sheriff elected, make sure that their parking lot's well maintained, have the mayor in their pocket, whatever it may be. They want to be power players in the community. And then, of course, at the national level, the Jerry Falwell Juniors of the world, they want to be, national kingmakers. And they argue, they legally can't do it, but they certainly are doing it. So I've got to track that down, Jeff. But I think that's what's, I think it's all about the money, tragically. We'll be back.
Hi, I'm Heather with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving of donations, volunteering, or even spreading the word, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to sustain for more than 20 years. Now, you can give to Free Speech TV through the Branch of Gratitude. This program is a sustainable way to give that reduces waste through paper mailing, postage, and staff hours. By choosing to participate in the Branch of Gratitude, you are joining hands with the socially conscious community and sending a message to the world that Free Speech TV is not only here to stay, it is here to thrive. Please call 877-378-8669 or go online to freespeech.org. Make a difference and join the Branch of Gratitude today.
Glenn in Olivet, Michigan. Hey, Glenn, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I was thinking about this a little bit. Last week I heard about the 30% tariff on solar, and I think we can agree that, decades ago tariffs worked. I'm kind of wondering what might be your take on this 30% tariff. Are we trying to build business in the U.S. and build the solar here, or is this just a gift to fossil fuel industry?
This is an overt and explicit gift to the fossil fuel industry, Glenn. It's only a 4-year tariff, and it diminishes every year of those 4 years. And so, it basically tapers down to zero over a 4-year period. And what that means is that, if it had been a 20-year tariff or a permanent tariff, then I could see solar companies in the United States saying, cool, we're going to ramp up, we're going to start building factories, we're going to, engage in construction here. But a 4-year tariff, nobody's going to build a factory based on a 4-year tariff, number one. And so, number two, what it does is it basically kneecaps the installation industries that have to buy the solar panels, that were buying cheap ones from China and are now going to, they're going to see the price go up, basically, if they continue to buy them from China or Europe or any place else. The price on solar panels is going to go up, and that's going to help the fossil fuel industry. It shouldn't surprise us that Donald Trump, who is president, because $800 million came out of the fossil fuel billionaire Koch network to get Republicans elected all over the country. And of course, you run these massive get out the vote efforts to get Republican voters out. And who are they going to vote for at the top of the ticket? Whoever's running for president is a Republican, which in this case was Trump. So, whether the Koch brothers explicitly were supporting Trump or not, they were supporting Trump and their network and all their buddies. And so here we are. So, yeah, that's my opinion on it.
Which raises another question. What about these people that have already contracted to put solar and get these panels from a foreign company, and now they've already bid this work, and now all of a sudden they got a 30% tariff on the product they're trying to install?
Yeah.
These installers, I mean, my gosh, we could put a lot of installers out of business doing this too.
Well, and I think that that's exactly what they want to do. There are about 600,000 people working in the solar industry in the United States. There's only 150,000 coal miners left in the United States. The fastest growing business in the United States last year was the solar industry. And, you know, if you're a fossil fuel billionaire, you look at that going, ha, this isn't good for us. And, you know, and so you say to your toady Donald Trump, you know, or your fellow billionaire Donald Trump, hey, you know, we're being hurt by this. Oh, sure, yeah, we'll kneecap the solar industry for a couple of years while I'm president. No problem. So, you know, yeah, I think I absolutely think that's what's going on. Glenn, thanks for the call. Doug in Corona, Michigan. Hey, Doug, what's up?
Yeah, Doug, I got a question for you. I've been listening to you for a little while here, and I'm getting a little confused on who the hell I'm supposed to vote for now. I mean, you're trying to tell me the Republicans are just as bad as the daggum Democrats. We've seen over the last 8 years what the destruction of the progressives have done. Now you're telling
Wait a second. Over the last 8 years, you saw President Obama bring the economy back from the disaster of the 8 years of George W. Bush. It's like,
what are you talking about?
You don't remember the stock market was at 8,000 in 2008. That was the Bush crash.
You dripping your George Soros money. You're talking about billionaires.
Oh, Jesus. I can't. I'm not even going to. That is not even worth a debate. I'm sorry. That's just pathetic. Mark in Las Vegas. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind?
Hi, yes. Sorry about the earlier call. I'm now off speakerphone. Boy, how am I going to follow
And I wasn't ripping on you, Mark. Frankly, I thought somebody was punking me. I'm sorry. So anyhow, if that was you, thank you for calling back. You were saying.
Sure, of course. Hey, you know, and you used the term properly a little bit ago, but it's not the environment like it's something out there. It's our environment.
You're right.
We're entirely dependent on that. Republicans, Democrats, humans, everybody. So when you harm the environment, you're also harming our economy and everything else.
Yes.
People need to understand that, you know.
And our tax dollars are subsidizing, to the tune of billions of dollars a year, are subsidizing the fossil fuel industry in the United States.
Yes.
And then the profits from that fossil fuel industry are being turned around to support politicians and marketing campaigns that deny the damage that the fossil fuel industry is doing to us.
Hey, you know, absolutely. I'm well aware of that. I just want to put out a request that many people out there are quite willing to go into debt when they remodel their homes, put a new bathroom in or something like that.
Sure.
Why is it that people seem much more reluctant to go into debt to go with clean energy? Now,
you mean like getting a $20,000 home loan to put solar panels on your house?
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. You know, that's a return of 5 or 10% when you do your own energy.
Right, over a
decade.
Yeah, over a decade, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, people will say, well, I'd much rather have the bathroom or something, and it doesn't make sense to me. We're talking about 800 years worth of pollution when you burn fossil fuels. They last 800 years.
Yeah.
So, you know, do you care about the future? Do you want a legacy? You know, Republicans are particularly stupid because they talk about the 1% as if they're going to be immune to these consequences.
Yeah.
But they're not going to be immune either.
No, I agree, and in fact, they're not immune. I mean, a lot of Republican homes got wiped out in the hurricanes that we had. A lot of Republican homes. Thank you for the call, by the way. A lot of Republican homes got whacked with the insane freezing weather that's coming about as a result of climate change. Had their pipes freeze and things. You know, a lot of Republicans lost their homes to the hurricanes and the floods and the wildfires and, you know, in California and whatnot. Yeah, it's a serious thing. It's hitting and hurting all of us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Hey, it's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Cracking the Code, How to Win Hearts, Change Minds, and Restore America's Original Vision. This is from the introduction, page 1. My wife Louise and I live atop 30 feet of water, 100 feet from shore, in a houseboat on a river in Portland, Oregon. Or at least we did when I wrote this book. One day, I stepped out our back door onto the floating deck that serves as our backyard and found myself confronting a very upset Canada goose. He bobbed his head up and down, lifted his wings to make his body look larger and more intimidating, and ran straight at me, hissing and trying to nip at me. Obviously, observing this behavior, my comedian friend Swami Beyondananda, Steve Behrman, who was visiting us that week, named the bird Gooselini. I had no idea why this psycho goose was attacking me, but there was no mistake that Gooselini was trying to communicate. Stay inside that house and don't come out. I got the message, but I didn't stay inside. Instead, every time I went out to water the plants on my deck, I brought a broom with me to fight off Gooselini. I found out what was going on a week later when I learned from my neighbor that a female goose had settled on her back deck just a few feet from our own and was sitting on a nest. I realized that Gooselini must have been the proud papa protecting his territory, and I stopped swatting at him with my broom. Gooselini has a lot to tell us about communication strategies. Even though he was just doing what a gander does when he wants a predator to leave, draw attention to himself and away from his mate, attack first and ask questions later, he was able to communicate the go-away part of his message to me pretty well. We all communicate all the time, even when we don't give much thought to what we are saying or how we're saying it. Because Gooselini was unable to use what we would call rational powers of persuasion, he communicated by going straight for the more primitive parts of my brain, the parts we shared as human and goose, the center of our gut feelings. First time Gooselini attacked, I backed off because he was successful in communicating an intent to harm me, which caused me to feel fear, the most primal and visceral of human emotions. The first key to unlocking the communication code is to understand that when we communicate, feeling comes first. Emotions will always trump intellect, at least in the short term. This emotive form of communication, however, ultimately didn't get Gooselini the response he wanted. On its own, the attack wasn't very persuasive. Instead of shooing me away, Gooselini made me angry. Effective communicators know how to get the response they want because they understand how to tailor a message to the person who's listening. They know the second key to unlocking the communication code is that the meaning of a communication is the response you get. Because Gooselini couldn't tell me his story, I had to imagine his story for myself. The first story I came up with was that he was simply a psycho goose trying to harm me for no reason I could understand. Second story I came up with after talking to my neighbor was the story of a dad protecting his soon-to-be hatched goslings. Both stories accurately described what was happening, but the stories led to very different endings. The psycho goose made me angry. The dad goose made me feel protective of Gooselini himself. In this book, I call such stories maps, and the world the stories describe as the territory. The third key to unlocking the communication code is, therefore, the map is not the territory. Each story captures a different piece of reality. No one story captures it all. The key to effective communication is to find the best story to use to convey your understanding of the world to the greatest number of people. In politics, we tell each other stories all the time. Think about it, politics is really nothing more than a large set of stories. The United States of America began as a story that the founders and framers told about a society that could live in harmony around the principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The country was held together after the Great Depression and through a war by a story told by Franklin Roosevelt,
which he called the New Deal. Ronald Reagan told a very different story, one we're still in, that he called the free market story. In Reagan's story, our corporate CEOs should run our society instead of our elected representatives because, as Reagan pointed out and probably believed, quote, the best minds are not in government. If they were, business would hire them away, end of quote from Reagan. Most of the stories we hear in the media today are scary. We're told to be afraid because the world is a bad place and people are untrustworthy. Every goose is a gooselini without understanding why. These scary stories are profitable to our infotainment industry and to the politicians who are typically allied with the barons of the infotainment industry. There is a different story, however, in which every Gooselini is a proud papa. It is a story of a world that is interconnected and of people who are fundamentally good. This is actually the traditional American liberal story, which has been told and understood since the first telling of it during the Enlightenment by thinkers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, John Locke, and Thomas Jefferson. It's the story that reaches directly back to the founding of this country. My aim with this book is to give you the tools to tell the liberal story and to tell it well. I'll show you how the process of communication is coded, actually hardwired into our brains, and help you crack that code to become a brilliant communicator. First, though, a few concepts it's important to master. Everybody wants the best outcomes, and their behavior reflects the best tools they have to achieve those outcomes. Another way of saying this is that people always make what they think are the best choices given the circumstances and the tools they have. All behavior has at its roots, the goal of a positive outcome. As a practical statement, this means that conservatives and liberals are both working toward the best world possible. And then it goes on from there. How do we differentiate this? How do we communicate this? The book is Cracking the Code. It's about the communication code. To a humanity.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. In the age of Trump, how do we deal with anxiety? Seriously, we've had on this program both when we were in D.C. a month or so ago, a D.C. psychiatrist and a D.C. psychotherapist, PhD psychoanalyst, who both told us on the air that they were seeing an explosion in their patient populations as a consequence of political anxiety. And the psychiatrist said that most of the people coming in were saying, "Quick, give me some SSRIs. I need some Prozac. I'm freaked out." Johann Hari has written a brilliant new book. It's called Lost Connections, Uncovering the Real Causes of Depression and the Unexpected Solutions. And this is more focused on specifically depression, but there's a connection to all of these things. And Johann is with us on the line right now. The book is Lost Connections. The website is thelostconnections.com. And you can tweet Johann at Johann Hari, JOHANNHARI 101. Johann, welcome back to the program.
I'm really excited to be on the program, Tom, not least because your writing about ADHD and your son really helped me to frame and think about this book. So I'm totally thrilled to be with you. Thank you.
Whoa, that's high praise. Thank you. Thank you. So why did you write Lost Connections? What inspired you to do this book?
There were these two mysteries that were kind of hanging over me. I was quite frightened to look into them. One was, why was I still depressed? When I was a teenager, I'd gone to my doctor. I'd said, I've got this sense like pain is leaking out of me. I can't control it. I can't regulate it. I was quite ashamed. And my doctor told me a story. He said, there's a chemical called serotonin in people's brains. You're clearly lacking it. That's why you feel this way. We'll give you these drugs to boost your serotonin levels. You'll be fine. And I felt a real sense of relief to be given that story. And when I started taking the drugs, I felt an even bigger sense of relief. But a couple of months later, that sense of pain started to come back. So I went back to my doctor. He gave me a higher dose. Again, I felt a bit better. Again, the pain came back. That continued until I was taking the maximum possible dose for 13 years. And at the end of it, I still felt really I was in a lot of pain. The second question, the much more important one, is I wanted to understand why so many other people were in so much pain. 1 in 5 Americans is taking a psychiatric drug. 1 in 4 middle-aged women in America, in the United States, is taking a chemical antidepressant. And it seemed to me, instinctively, it couldn't be just that something was going wrong inside the chemistry of people's brains. If it was, why is it increasing so much? Like you say, why would it go up after Trump? Trump was not an event in the chemistry of our brains. He was an event in the world. So I went and interviewed the leading scientists all over the world about what causes depression and anxiety and what solves them, you know, from Berlin to Buenos Aires, from Sydney to San Francisco. And I learned so many things. One is that story my doctor told me is not true. Depression is not caused just by a chemical imbalance in your brain. Professor Andrew Scull at Princeton University says it is deeply misleading and unscientific to say that depression is just caused by a chemical imbalance. That doesn't mean there's no value to chemical antidepressants. There's some. Happy to talk about that if you want. But the causes of depression and anxiety, I learned, are largely in the way we live. There are some biological factors, but I learned there are 7 key factors in the way we're living today that are causing depression and anxiety, that are making it much worse, and that there are very different kinds of antidepressants waiting for us, which are about solving those problems.
So those different kinds of antidepressants, you're not talking about drugs, you're talking about things to do, right?
Exactly. So I'll give you an example. I noticed that lots of the people I know who are depressed and anxious, the depression and anxiety focuses around their work. So I started to look at evidence. How do people feel about their work? Gallup did the most detailed ever study in the United States of this. They found 13% of us like our work. We look forward to it most of the time. 63% of people are what they called sleepwalking through their work. They don't like it, they don't hate it, and 24% of people hate their work. So you think about that. 87% of people don't like the thing they're doing most of the time. I thought, could there be some connection between that and our depression and anxiety epidemic? I discovered there was an amazing Australian scientist called Michael Marmot who actually discovered the key to this in the 1970s. Professor Marmot found out the key thing that makes people depressed at work is if you go to work and you feel you have no or low control. You feel like you're just like a robot on a line, right? And this is connected to, this is one of the things that connects so many of the things that cause depression and anxiety. Everyone listening to this knows they have natural physical needs, right? We all know we need food, we need water, we need clean air, we need warmth. If I took those things away from you, Tom, you would be in trouble real fast. There's equally strong evidence that we have natural psychological needs. You've got to feel you belong. You've got to feel your life has meaning and purpose. You've got to feel that people see you and value you. You've got to feel you've got a future that makes sense. And our culture is good at lots of things, but there's evidence we've been getting less and less good at meeting these deep psychological needs. So let's think about that in relation to work. If being controlled at work is what makes people depressed, I start to think, well, what's the solution to that, right? What's the antidepressant for that? I learned, and this is really connected to something you've done so much work on your show, I went to Baltimore and met a woman called Meredith Keogh. Meredith used to go to bed every Sunday night, sick with anxiety, thinking about the week ahead. And, you know, she had an office job. It wasn't the worst office job in the world. She wasn't being bullied, but she couldn't bear the thought this was going to be the next 40 years of her life. So one day with her husband, Josh, she did something quite bold. Josh worked in a bike store he had since he was a teenager. And, you know, it's controlled work. It's insecure work. He got very low benefits. One day, Josh and his friends had asked themselves, what does our boss actually do? You know, they like their boss, but they fixed all the bikes. They quit and they opened a bike store that runs on a different principle. It is not a corporation with a boss. It's a democratic cooperative. So they take all the big decisions together. They vote on them. They share out the good tasks and the less good tasks so no one gets stuck with the depressing jobs. And they share the profits. And one of the things that was so fascinating to me there, totally in line with what Professor Marmot had found, is how many of them had been depressed and anxious before, but were no longer depressed in an environment where they were no longer controlled. As Josh put it to me, there's no reason why any business should be run as a top-down corporation. As you've talked about, Tom, that is a really recent invention in human history, and it's making us feel terrible, right? Imagine how many people listening to this who are depressed and anxious at the moment would feel differently if they knew that they were going into work tomorrow to a workplace that they controlled with their colleagues, where if there's a boss, he's elected, he's accountable to them, you know, where they set the priorities, right, where you regain control over your life. That's an antidepressant.
Forgive my interrupting, Johan, sure, but we have about a minute and a half left. You mentioned shared profits. I'm guessing that their income went up And I'm wondering, you know, I'm old enough to remember what life was like before Reaganomics and Thatcheronomics in the UK and neoliberal policies in Europe. The lifestyle of working people has gone from really healthy in the 60s and 70s to hanging on by our fingernails for the basic stuff at the bottom of Maslow's pyramid, you know, housing and things.
Yeah.
Might that be a very, very large factor too? Should we, I mean, just bringing back unions and raising wages?
We know it is because when they piloted a universal basic income in Canada in a town called Dauphin in the 70s, so they just said to people, we're giving you a guaranteed income, nothing you can do means we'll take it away. Severe depression and anxiety that was so bad people had to be hospitalized fell by 9%. The financial insecurity created by Reaganism and Thatcherism is a massive driver of the depression and anxiety epidemic. And this tells you something.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and you're depressed and anxious, you are not crazy. You're not a machine with broken parts. You're a human being with unmet needs, and you need help from the society to get those needs met. You need social change. This is not my position, it's the position of the World Health Organization that says we need to talk less about chemical imbalances and more about power imbalances.
Wow. Wow. So you're calling, I mean, the book, we're talking with Johann Hari, the book is Lost Connections, and I just want to, you know, cause one, disconnection from meaningful work, disconnection from other people, disconnection from meaningful values, status and respect, childhood trauma, the natural world, and then your prescription is to reconnect in all these regards. There's a story
that really helped me to realize what's going on here. There's a South African psychiatrist called Derek Sommerfeld I went to meet who happened to be in Cambodia when chemical antidepressants were first introduced there. And the Cambodian doctors didn't know what they were, so he explained. And they said, we don't need them, we've already got antidepressants. They explained about a farmer whose life they had helped to change. He'd been really depressed, he had to work in a field.
They bought the guy a cow so he could be self-sufficient. I'm sorry, Johann, I know the story,
Sure.
and I'm hitting the break here. Johann Hari, the book is Lost Connections. It's brilliant, uncovering the real causes of depression. Johann, hang on just a second.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
The website is thelostconnections.com. Johann, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Tom, for everything you do.
Great talking with you. Thanks. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Corky in Hilton, New York. Hey, Corky, what's on your mind today?
Oh, Tom, yeah, I want to know where I can get that 2011 correspondence dinner with Barack Obama.
It lives on YouTube.
Was it? Because I had it
seen
on
clips
my
of
tape machine.
Pardon?
I had it on my DVR, but somebody erased it.
Yeah. I'm quite sure you can find it on YouTube.
Because that's the way to drive him crazy.
Yeah.
It does. I'm telling you.
I think that's what drove him
to no end.
Yeah, I think that's what provoked him to run for president. In part, I think the other part of it, you know, part of it was a fun revenge mission because revenge is like really a high value for Donald Trump. And the other part of it was that he thought that running for president, as Michael Wolff points out in his new book, Fire and Fury, that he thought that running for president would raise his profile enough that the Trump companies would start making even greater profits. And, you know, it looked like that was what was happening.
I think he hated Obama so much that it just drove him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, Trump is driven by animus, by hatred, and by the need for love and attention. And his need for love is unending, as the Republicans are starting to figure out, because they're now publicly sucking up to him in ways that are just breathtaking.
But he's embarrassing them. He's embarrassing the hell out of them.
Yeah. Some of them.
You hear McCabe just quit?
Yeah. Well, McCabe, you know, we don't know exactly why McCabe is quitting. He's now eligible for early retirement. He's had, well, I think 20 years in the agency.
Yeah, but they said he had it scheduled for March.
Yeah.
And he moved it up to today.
Oh, I missed that detail.
He's gone.
So he literally left today. He didn't just announce it today.
No, he left today.
Huh.
That's what they're reporting.
The day before the State of the Union. I wonder what that has to do with anything. I have a feeling that there's a shoe here that's going to drop, and you know, it's going to be real interesting when it does.
I hope it don't have a mushroom cloud when it drops.
Well, that's a concern, and the other big concern that many of us have is, you know, what happens if Trump finds himself in the position of a cornered rat. You know, a cornered rat. I cornered a rat once. We had an old house in Vermont, and you know, down in the basement I found a rat, and I went down there with a laundry basket to try to catch it, and literally backed it into the corner, and that thing just reared up on its hind legs and started making this noise at me like it was going to come and kill me. I mean, scared the bejesus out of me. And so if Trump feels totally cornered, I mean, this is a mammalian response. If he feels totally cornered, how is he going to lash out? Is he going to lash out by firing, you know, firing Mueller, the special prosecutor, like Nixon did? Or is he going to lash out by starting a nuclear war with North Korea and diverting our attention, or with Iran? I mean,
I think that's more likely.
I am very concerned about that as a possibility, Corky. I'm very concerned about it. In fact, I think a lot of Americans are very concerned about it, particularly Hawaiians. The Hawaiians have figured this out, right? Because they had their 37 minutes of terror, and it's a tough one. Corky, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. Stick around.
Hi, I'm Heather with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving of donations, volunteering, or even spreading the word, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to sustain for more than 20 years. Now, you can give to Free Speech TV through the Branch of Gratitude. This program is a sustainable way to give that reduces waste through paper mailing, postage, and staff hours. By choosing to participate in the Branch of Gratitude, you are joining hands with the socially conscious community and sending a message to the world that Free Speech TV is not only here to stay, it is here to thrive. Please call 877-378-8669 or go online to freespeech.org. Make a difference and join the Branch of Gratitude today.
Welcome back. Johan Hari is absolutely brilliant. I got to tell you that, and his new book, Lost Connections, it is this generation's version of Bowling Alone. If you remember Bowling Alone when it came out in the late 90s, early 2000s. Another book by another British social scientist who was pointing out that we were living increasingly isolated lives with our televisions and our video games and the internet, but actual physical and nearby social contact, physical contact, starvation, essentially, to us. And the fact that 1 in 4 women in America, 1 in 5 Americans are on some sort of an antidepressant or a psychiatric drug, that's mind-boggling. I have a friend, a woman who had gone through it was a whole process, without going into all the details. Anyhow, she had an actual physical condition and was told by her doctor that a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor drug, an SSRI drug, trying to remember the name of it. It wasn't Prozac, but it was one of the newer, quote, newer ones, would solve her problem. And she tried it for just about a year, a little less than a year. And a very, very low dose. She was taking about a quarter of the normal dose. And at the end of that time, she decided she wanted a kick, and she was getting electric shocks at her brain. I mean, a really serious withdrawal from this stuff. I am predicting 10 years from now, we're going to see the family of SSRIs as moving up the scale of controlled substances, that they'll be class 4 controlled substances like benzodiazepines are right now. It is just amazing. Just amazing. David in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Hi. I was listening to your discussion about the solar tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
I recently came from a meeting on utility issues and sponsored by the Sierra Club, and there's a lot of experts there, and they were talking about how drastically the costs of wind and solar are dropping, so that it's dropping so fast that extra cost is not that relevant. The big impact would be on installers, who is the mass of the workforce, not just the producers of the panels. But wind is down to 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour, and solar is down to around 2.5 cents. So it's drastically lower.
Yeah, and it's in most parts of the country, it's actually below the cost of fossil fuels.
Right.
And radically below the cost of fossil fuels when you consider the subsidies that we provide to the fossil fuel industry and the damage that the fossil fuel industry is doing to our country, with everything from 10,000 additional cancers a year from breathing automobile fumes and soot and things from exhaust, to the destruction of our environment more broadly, the cancer clusters that you see in Cancer Alley downwind from all the refineries in Texas and Louisiana, and then climate change and the damage that that's doing. If you factor those things in, if you add those to the cost of fossil fuels, gasoline, I think, would probably double in price.
Right. Well, another thing, you're just talking about improving your mental state and joining a group that has an action to change, such as the Sierra Club or some other group, gives you information, gives you a direction, and helps you change your feeling of helplessness.
Absolutely, David. I have said so many times to people, getting active is the best therapy.
Right. The Sierra Club has a program right now to get mayors to go 100% clean energy for their cities.
Mm-hmm.
And this is catching on because cities are starting to realize, well, we can supply our own energy. We don't need to go through the utility necessarily. And utilities are kind of divesting themselves of the energy plants and just creating the interconnection, so that they're supplying the connection but not necessarily owning the plants. So that's a trend right now, and I think we're headed for a logical future, not just cleaner but more logical, reducing inefficiency, letting cities produce their own energy, letting them be responsible instead of depending on somebody else to be responsible for their future.
Well, we're heading in that direction, David, unless the Koch brothers and the Republican Party can derail us. Putting $400 million into an election, into a single election cycle, is pretty breathtaking. And
it's hard for mayors to deny the economic benefit. You can say anything you want, but if they're going to reduce costs for their citizens, then that's a political boon for any mayor.
Yeah, amen. David, thanks for the call. Well said. Phil in Simsbury, Connecticut. Hey, Phil, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Great to talk to you today. And that was
Phil.
An awesome.
Phil, let me pause you. I'm sorry. I just noticed that I've got about 15 or 20 seconds until we're going to hit a break, and I don't want to ask you to jam your comments into that. I'm going to put you back on hold, and I'll pick you up on the other side of the break. But the point that our previous caller made is a really important one. And I want to emphasize that solar and wind are now cheaper than any form of fossil fuel energy, particularly when you consider the impacts of fossil fuels on our planet. And yet the fossil fuel billionaires are putting $400 million into the next election, and the Republican Party still refuses to acknowledge climate change.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
There's something fundamentally sick and twisted about that. We'll be back with your calls, starting with Phil right after the break. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, and today we're reading from Arundhati Roy's brilliant book, Capitalism, A Ghost Story. This is from the afterword, at the very end of the book. Yesterday morning, the people the police cleared Zuccotti Park, but today the people are back. The police should know that this protest is not a battle for territory. We're not fighting for the right to occupy a park here or there. We're fighting for justice. Justice is not just for the people of the United States, but for everybody. What you've achieved since September 17th, when the Occupy movement began in the United States, is to introduce a new imagination, a new political language into the heart of the empire. You've reintroduced the right to dream into a system that tried to turn everybody into zombies, mesmerized into equating mindless consumerism with happiness and fulfillment. As a writer, let me tell you, this is an immense achievement. I cannot thank you enough. We are talking about justice. Today, as we speak, the Army of the United States is waging a war of occupation in Iraq and Afghanistan. U.S. drones are killing civilians in Pakistan and beyond. Tens of thousands of U.S. troops and death squads are moving into Africa. If spending trillions of dollars of your money to administer occupations in Iraq and Afghanistan is not enough, a war against Iran is being talked up. Ever since the Great Depression, the manufacture of weapons and the export of war have been key ways in which the United States has stimulated its economy. Just recently, under President Obama, the United States made a $60 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia. It hopes to sell thousands of bunker busters to the United Arab Emirates. It has sold $5 billion worth of military aircraft to my country, India, my country, which has more poor people than all the poorest countries of Africa put together. All these wars, from the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to Vietnam, Korea, Latin America, have claimed millions of lives. All of them fought to secure the, quote, American way of life, end quote. Today we know that the American way of life, the model that the rest of the world is meant to aspire toward, has resulted in 400 people owning the wealth of half the population of the United States. It has meant thousands of people being turned out of their homes and jobs while the U.S. government bailed out banks and corporations. American International Group alone was given $182 billion in the bailout. The Indian government worships U.S. economic policy. As a result of 20 years of the free market economy, today 100 of India's richest people own assets equal to 1/4 of the country's GDP, while more than 80% of Indian people live on less than 50 cents a day. 250,000 farmers driven into a spiral of death have committed suicide. We call this progress and now think of ourselves as a superpower. Like you, we are well qualified, we have nuclear bombs and obscene inequality. The good news is that people have had enough and are just not going to take it anymore. The Occupy movement has joined thousands of other resistance movements all over the world in which the poorest of people are standing up and stopping the richest corporations in their tracks. Few of us dreamed that we would see it, the people of the United States on our side, trying to do this in the heart of empire. I don't know how to communicate the enormity of what this means. The 1% say we don't have demands. They don't know, perhaps, that our anger alone would be enough to destroy them. But there are some things, a few pre-revolutionary thoughts I had for us to think about together. We want to put a lid on this system that manufactures inequality. We want to put a cap on the unfettered accumulation of wealth and property by individuals as well as corporations. As capitalists and Liddites, we demand, 1, an end to cross-ownership in business. For example, weapons manufacturers cannot own TV stations. Mining corporations cannot run newspapers. Business houses cannot fund universities. Drug companies cannot control public health funds. 2, natural resources and essential infrastructure, water supply, electricity, health, and education cannot be privatized. 3, everybody must have a right to shelter, education, and health care. 4, the children of the rich cannot inherit their parents' wealth. This struggle has reawakened our imagination. Somewhere along the line, capitalism reduced the idea of justice to mean just human rights. The idea and the idea of dreaming of equality became blasphemous. We're not fighting to tinker with reforming a system that needs to be replaced. As a capist and a Lidite, I salute your struggle. Salam and Zimbad Dad. That's the end of the book. This is from the very opening of it, chapter 1. Is it a house or a home? A temple to the new India or a warehouse for its ghosts? Ever since Antilla arrived in Altamont Road in Mumbai, exuding mystery and a quiet menace, things have not been the same. Here we are, the friend who took me there said. Pay your respects to our new ruler. Antilla belongs to India's richest man, Mukesh Ambani. I'd read about his about this most expensive dwelling ever built. The 27 floors, 3 helipads, 9 lifts, hanging gardens, ballrooms, weather rooms, gymnasiums, 6 floors of parking, and 600 servants. Nothing had prepared me for the vertical lawn, a soaring 27-story high wall of grass attached to a vast metal grid. The grass was dry in patches, bits have fallen off in neat rectangles. Clearly, trickle down hadn't worked. But gush up certainly has. That's why in a nation of 1.2 billion, India's 100 richest people own assets equivalent to 1/4 of the GDP. And then Arundhati Roy goes on from there talking about how India is kind of an example of capitalism run amok. Capitalism, a ghost story by Arundhati Roy. Welcome back. On the line with us is Aaron Morrison, senior staff writer with The Movement by Mic.com, MIC.com, the website mic.com/themovement. And you can tweet Aaron Morrison at Morrison, Morrison, or at The Movement or at MIC. Aaron, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to come on and have a conversation with you.
Thank you. You wrote a brilliant piece about Glo Merriweather. The title, Glo Merriweather witnessed a shooting death at the Charlotte protest, now faces a felony charge. Tell us this story. Who is Glo Merriweather and what happened?
Well, Glo Merriweather is, I think it would be good to think of them, and I'm going to refer to them as them because Glo Merriweather is gender nonconforming. So that might confuse some people, but with their pronouns are they, them, and their. So Glo Merriweather is someone, Charlotte resident, sitting at home and gets a text message that says, hey, police just shot another black man in our city. And so Glo, already a known organizer in the community, organized a sort of a mobilization over to the site where a man that was identified as Keith Lamont Scott was shot. He was shot in September 2016. And so, a lot of people who are aware of that shooting know that it led to some civil unrest. There was, police termed it rioting. And you had so many people in the streets there. But the reason why we're telling Glo's story is because Glo, more than a year later, is charged or indicted with the offense of inciting a riot and assault on a government official related to the protest. And my story simply asks, okay, why is it that a protest that involved hundreds of people is being narrowed down to just one person as supposedly inciting a riot, that sparked some of the violence that was seen in Charlotte in 2016. So that's the scope of the story in short, but I'm sure we can talk a little bit more deeper about some of the implications.
You mentioned in the kind of preamble to this that Glo was an activist and reached out to all of Glo's friends and associates and said, let's have a protest, and that protest ended up turning violent. Is there not a legal thread that could be followed there, or is that? I mean, what's the specific objection to Glo being charged with that?
Well, essentially, it really speaks to what is it that any one person can do to be responsible for the actions of dozens or hundreds of people. And that's essentially what this charge, when you read the simple language in the indictment documents, this charge seems to say that something that Glo did caused others to respond in the way that they did, meaning there was looting, there was property damage, that officers were assaulted, but Glo is being pinned for essentially inciting that.
And I'm guessing the argument is that it wasn't Glo who provoked the crowd, it was the police killing an unarmed black man.
Well, that, and also the police response to peaceful protesters. So a lot of what Glo and other people who were involved in the protest have said is that, there was no incitement on their side. They feel like the moment that police declared their assembly unlawful, they responded with tear gas and rubber bullets and things that incited anger in the crowd. So the question of who's inciting what is present in this story.
Yeah, I agree, and also this a national trend, I suspect, that we're seeing here, and I think that it started in a big way the day after on January 21st, the day after Trump's inauguration. You know, well, really the day of Trump's inauguration, in fact. You know, the kettling of those 200-plus protesters in Washington, D.C., and the kind of mass arrests and whatnot, and charging people who had, you know, typically you charge protesters with obstructing traffic or something like that, and charging them instead with major felonies, long-term jail sentences. It seems to me, and you know, you're a reporter, you're a writer, you're looking at these things probably with a larger lens than I am. But it seems to me that what we're seeing is an increase in the efforts by both federal and state and local governments right across the board in the United States to essentially crack down, to go Richard Nixon Law and Order full tilt, you know, a la, you know, coming from the top, coming from Trump, probably channeling Nixon via Roger Stone, and that this is a real dangerous thing for a democratic republic. We don't want to end up being one of those kind of countries where if you protest, you go to jail.
Right, and that is essentially what the main concern is for not only for Glow and the people in Charlotte who have been following this, but people across the country. We know that you can draw, and this is what I lay out in the story, in the Mike story, is that you can draw a line from the response to the Ferguson protest after the shooting death of Michael Brown in 2014 to a sort of parallel movement responding to Black Lives Matter, which then became Blue Lives Matter. And so this Blue Lives Matter movement, I posit in my story, helped to inflame and plant ideas that protesters who are rightly coming out and protesting police brutality and the shooting deaths were now being painted as a direct and lethal threat, possible lethal threat to law enforcement. So in that time, since 2014, you've seen where states are looking to pass what is known as Blue Lives Matter laws, which create hate crime designations for people who allegedly attack police officers. And yes, there have been legitimate concerns when you think about what happened in Dallas and what happened in Baton Rouge, Louisiana in 2016, surrounding right after the Alton Sterling and Philando Castile shootings in Minnesota and Louisiana. So we know, yes, police officers have a hard job. They do face threats at times, but what the Blue Lives Matter movement has really done is linked any sort of group or protesters speaking out about the particular targeting of African Americans by the police to a very violent threat that is more likely to come from white nationalists or white supremacists versus, you know, any sort of black-led movement. So then you get the term black identity extremists, which is what the FBI put out in the summer of last year, which essentially says these folks are radicalized and believe that any form of police brutality deserves some sort of counter response that is violent towards police officers. So hopefully that gives you a sense of really where the national scope of this. This has been a long time coming, and Globe Merriweather's case is just an example of what can happen when you criminalize protest. Yeah, well said. We're talking with Aaron Morrison, senior staff writer with the Movement by the Mic, MIC.com. And Aaron, I just an hour ago, I got an email from Donald Trump. When he first started running for office, I sent $5 to his campaign, as I do with pretty much all politicians. So I get on their mailing list and see what they're up to. And they've been begging me for money ever since. And that's, of course, what this email was. I get almost every single day a request for money from the Trump-Pence campaign. But this one is amazing. He says, Fred, because I've registered as Fred Flintstone. He says, Fred, they have the fake news peddlers, so-called experts, illegal immigrants, and Hollywood swamp stars on their side. But we, all caps W-E,
have the soldiers, farmers, police officers, veterans, the Americans who have been forgotten. We have the nurses and truck drivers, the husbands and wives, grandparents, kids and neighbors. We have every citizen who believes that America must be put first. We have the beautiful heart and soul of this country. You, now with the end of January deadline coming up, will you show the world that you're still with us? Send us money. But the point is, this divide and conquer strategy that, Trump has just been doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on. What is this doing to our country?
Well, I think what's clear is that it's inflaming tensions. I mean, and that's probably putting it lightly. There is a real concern among activists, those in the Black Lives Matter movement and those who don't necessarily identify with that, that there is a quiet effort to ensure that these movements are cut off at the legs as soon as it seems like they're really picking up steam and really having some sort of effect on our national discourse, which we know Black Lives Matter had. Right. Already had. So I think for them it's an existential threat. Excuse me. They need to find a way to counteract this. Otherwise, it threatens the very sort of their bread and butter of what they have institutionalized in this country as far as law enforcement goes. So if we're talking about where are we headed? I think we're headed backwards, and a lot of people would agree with me on this. We're headed backwards to a time where there was less of a concern about protecting the right of everybody to protest and speak out, and that some people are just now not going to be allowed to do that without pretty severe consequences.
Right, and on top of that, you get Donald Trump telling a group of police officers, I don't want you putting your hand on those people's heads when you put them in the car anymore. Just kick them around a little. Right? And he didn't say literally kick them around, but that certainly was the message that was conveyed. Aaron Morrison, senior staff writer with The Movement by Mike.com, mic.com/The Movement. You can tweet Aaron L. Morrison, at Aaron L. Morrison, or at The Movement, or at Mike, M-I-C. Aaron, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate it.
Me too. Great talking with you. We'll be right back.
Okay.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Let's see, Free Speech TV caller John in Minneapolis. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on Johan Hari's, critique of, what's going on as far as depression. I think that they're so overwhelmed, physicians are so overwhelmed that when people come in, they just, here's your Prozac. They don't really investigate it from a behavioral point of view to separate to see if it's actually, a problem with the person's, neurologic status in their brain, that they have low serotonin or whatever. What they do is they just go ahead and, that's the way it used to be done. It used to be that people would come in, they would send them to a psychologist first, and they would try cognitive therapy, and then usually the psychologist would determine whether it was a cognitive issue that could be treated that way rather than, just with drugs. Right. And I think it's just such an epidemic. And I think that, structurally we need to change things in society. The happiest society, I think, in the world is Denmark, and it's a very egalitarian society. So I think that societies where the resources are more spread out, more egalitarian, rather than having a huge gap between the very rich and the very poor, which is how it has evolved in this country. That produces a lot more depression, and I think a lot of social scientists. I've read some of James Gilligan's work, who is a psychiatrist and from Harvard, and he's retired now, but I think his premise is really true that when there is, squeezing of resources, that produces a lot more violent behavior, and in a society spread out, it's a lot different. So that's just what I wanted to say.
You said it very well. The situation in Denmark is that there is virtually no poverty. And there are very few people who are just obscenely rich, and it's because the tax rate is so high. And that stabilizes the society, and it provides the income for a social safety net that lifts everybody up a little bit, and just enough. And we were fairly close to that in the United States right up until the Reagan time. I mean, we really kind of built that society. We were on that trajectory from the 1930s. FDR put us on that course until Ronald Reagan was after he committed treason with cutting a deal with the Iranians to hold the hostages for a whole year to take down Jimmy Carter. Reagan came in and just destroyed the whole thing. And now we've got people who hate their jobs I mean, even, I remember going down to my dad's tool and die shop when I'd, leave elementary school. His tool and die shop was where we first lived in Lansing, was maybe 10 or 12 blocks away from my elementary school when I was in first, second grade. And I'd just walk down there after school and hang out with Dad until he'd take me home at 5 o'clock. And these guys, I mean, it wasn't particularly, quote, meaningful work. They weren't changing the world. They were making precision, tool parts for Fisher Body. But they were paid well enough that they felt like they had control of their lives. I'd guess about half of them had, summer cottages up on Houghton Lake kind of thing, I mean, the middle-class guys could afford to do that. And that is just wiped out. It's just wiped out. John, excellent point. Thank you for the call. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Phil is up next.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Back, let's check in with Talk Media News. I thought we were going to I've got to pick up the news here. This is brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, Ellen Ratner's new book. On the line with us, the author of Sideswiped, former Congressman Bob Ney. Congressman, welcome back to the program. What's happening in the world today?
Well, thank you, Tom. Some breaking news. Andrew McCabe has stepped down, and of course, he is the deputy FBI director.
Now he was able to step down today instead of in March when he hits his 20 years in the bureau or whatever. Because he had accumulated vacation time. Is that the beginning and end of the story, or is he trying to make a statement just before the State of the Union address?
No, I think it's timing. And look, I think there's a backstory here internally beyond Trump, but also, because we all know that he and McCabe
don't get along.
Yes, and he had asked him about the voting. McCabe's wife ran, and there was a Hillary Clinton. We all know the story, affiliated PAC, et cetera. So a lot of animosity. But I think a lot of it also came internally, and I think this is the beginning, Tom, of reshuffling. McCabe is the first step. That's what I believe.
So you think that Trump is going to put one of his apparatchiks, one of his toadies, in as the deputy director of the FBI?
Oh, I would assume so. I mean, look, Sessions is over there, and with DOJ, and of course, with the FBI itself. So, yes, I assume somebody's going to be replaced there that will be, quote, pro-Trump or
and he already fired
voted for Trump. I don't know.
Yeah, he already fired what's his name. So now he's got what is it? Chris Wray is the director of the FBI. Am I remembering correctly? Okay, so
yes,
what does Chris Wray do, who is a career FBI agent and apparently a straight shooter? What does he do if Trump says, "Okay, Chris, your number 2 guy is going to be, George Papadopoulos"? or the mooch, or the FBI equivalent thereof?
Well, I think that then Ray would have to make a decision. Does he stay or does he work within the elements that he's, going to have? Now, Ray has his own hands full because, there's some dissension, the whole Comey deal, how Comey handled, frankly, the entire thing. I think, and I defended Hillary Clinton, Comey cleared her and then began to trash her. You don't do that. So, I think there's so much there. And then you throw in McCabe and his wife and Trump. And, look, McCabe knew Trump was breathing down his neck, right? Yeah. And so I think he just said, that's it, that's enough. But I think it is the beginning of indicator of some reshuffling over there.
Yeah, it was more like Trump viewed him as a piñata. So what else is up, Bob?
Well, sure. The State of the Union's coming up. Right now, 8 Democratic members have said that they are, not going to go to the State of the Union, and that's been it so far. And of course, in mass, the Democratic Party is not going to say boycott the State of the Union. People have to be there. And then I've been to the State of the Unions. You know how they run. Some people stand up and they don't, and the president might get the entire chamber to stand up on some things, and he might not, obviously, on others. I think you're going to, if he stays to the script, you'll see a less combative Donald Trump. If he stays to the script.
Well, he did that in Davos until the Q&A session afterward.
well, that's right. That's different. Then he goes off the script. The script. And then also the big debate on Mueller. Lindsey Graham came out and said that there should be legislation. He can't be fired. McCarthy, the leader in the House, came out and said he shouldn't. As you know by now, Senator Joe Manchin, and that's been touted a lot because he is a Democratic member of the Senate, said that he wasn't ready for it and called it New York speak. That has been, I've been doing radio all morning. That's everywhere, obviously, all over the airwaves. And, just because of the nature of being a Democratic senator, but also let's remember he is from West Virginia.
And he's up for re-election.
He's up for re-election.
And he has a progressive challenger in the primary.
Exactly, and the governor switched parties there to Republicans, so he's got this whole 9 yards there, and he kind of did speak that would sell in West Virginia in the sense that New Yorkers are hot and get angry, or
at least he thinks it will. I mean, Bernie Sanders was perceived by many as kind of a New Yorker. He has that kind of New York way of talking, and he won the West Virginia primary by 21 points, as I recall.
Sure.
So I think policy can triumph. Right. But anyhow, we got a minute left, Bob. What else is going on?
Okay. Immigration plan, that's what everybody's talking about. Let's see what the president says tonight. The president has 4 things in there. The Democratic side can, look at one of them, the Dreamers, and maybe some border security. The other 2 are non-starts. So let's see what the president says about that and what he can do or not do. And I don't know if Schumer will meet with him or not. It's hard to say.
Yeah. Do you think he's going to I predict he's going to set up some straw men in the State of the Union. Like his tweet the other day about how, 4 out of 5 terrorists are foreign-born or something like that. And only if you take one particular statistic and slice and dice it in one particular way, and it's just it just proves Lincoln's old thing that figures don't lie, but liars can figure. I'm expecting more of that. I mean, we saw some of that during the Bush administration too. Particularly around the so-called war on terror.
Right. You probably will mention opioids tonight, which will be, received by a lot of people. Transportation, he could actually talk himself out of that if he puts too much into the states and not federal funding. I'm curious to see what he's going to do on that tonight.
Yeah. Well, he's going to sell it as a $1 trillion bill, as a $1 trillion deal. But most people won't know from watching the State of the Union that really it's a giant effort to privatize the infrastructure of the United States.
True.
Anyhow, I got a boogie. Bob Ney with Talk Media News. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you so much.
Good talking with you. We'll be back with Rashad Robinson, Executive Director of Color Change, right after the news at the top of the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com. In the Thom Hartmann University Book Club today, we're reading From American Holocaust by David Stannard, The Conquest of the New World. This is from the prologue. Just 21 years after Columbus's first landing in the Caribbean, the vastly populous island that the explorer had renamed Hispaniola was effectively desolate. Nearly 8 million people, those Columbus chose to call Indians, had been killed by violence, disease, and despair. It took a little longer, about the span of a single human generation, but what happened on Hispaniola was the equivalent of more than 50 Hiroshimas, and Hispaniola was only the beginning. Within no more than a handful of generations following their first encounters with the Europeans, the vast majority of the Western Hemisphere's native peoples had been exterminated. The pace and magnitude of their obliteration varied from place to place and from time to time, but for years, now historical demographers have been uncovering in region upon region post-Columbia depopulation rates of between 90 and 98%, with such regularity that an overall decline of 95% in Native American population has become a working rule of thumb. What this means is that, on average, for every 20 natives alive at the moment of European contact, when the lands of the Americans teemed with numerous tens of millions of people, only one stood in their place when the bloodbath was over. To put this in a contemporary context, the ratio of native survivorship in the Americas following European contact was less than half of what the human survivorship ratio would be in the United States today if every single white person and every single black person died. The destruction of the Indians of the Americas was far and away the most massive act of genocide in the history of the world. That is why, as one historian aptly has said, far from the heroic and romantic heraldry that customarily is used to symbolize the European settlement of the Americas, the emblem most congruent with reality would be a pyramid of skulls. Scholars estimate the size of the post-Columbian Holocaust have climbed sharply in recent decades. Too often, however, academic discussions of this ghastly event have reduced the devastated indigenous people and their cultures to statistical calculations in reconciling demographic analyses. It was easy for this to happen. From the very beginning, merely taking the account of so mammoth a cataclysm seemed an impossible task. Wrote one Spanish adventurer who arrived in the New World only 2 decades after Columbus's first landing, and who himself openly reveled in the torrent of native blood. There was neither, quote, paper nor time enough to tell all that the conquistadors did to ruin the Indians and rob them and destroy the land, end quote. As a result, the very effort to describe the disaster's overwhelming magnitude has tended to obliterate both the writer's and the reader's sense of its truly horrific human element. In an apparent effort to counteract this tendency, one writer, Tsvetsan Todorov, began his study of the events of 1492 and immediately thereafter with an epigraph from Diego de Landa's Relación de las Casas de Yucatán. Quote, the captain, Alonso Lopez de Avila, brother-in-law of the Adelmento de Montejo, captured during the war in Bacalan a young Indian woman of lovely and gracious appearance. She had promised her husband, fearful lest they should kill him in the war, not to have relations with any other man but him, and so no persuasion was sufficient to prevent her from taking her own life to avoid being defiled by another man. And because of this, they had her thrown to the dogs. Toborov then dedicates his book to the memory of a Mayan woman devoured by dogs. It is important to try and hold in mind an image of that woman and her brothers and sisters and the innumerable others who suffered similar fates as one reads Todorov's book, or this one, or any other work on this subject. Just as it is essential, as one reads about the Jewish Holocaust or the horrors of the African slave trade, to keep in mind the treasure of a single life in order to avoid becoming emotionally anesthetized by the sheer force of such overwhelming human evil and destruction. There is, for example, the case of a small Indian boy whose name no one knows today, and whose unmarked skeletal remains are hopelessly intermingled with those of hundreds of anonymous others in a mass grave on the American plains, but a boy who once played on the banks of a quiet creek in eastern Colorado, until the morning in 1864, when the American soldiers came. Then, as one of the cavalrymen later told it, while his compatriots were slaughtering and mutilating the bodies of all the women and all of the children they could catch, he spotted the boy trying to flee. Quote, "There was one child, probably 3 years old, just big enough to walk through the sand. The Indians had gone ahead and this little child was behind following after them. The little fellow was perfectly naked, traveling on the sand. I saw one man get off his horse at a distance of about 75 yards and drop his rifle and fire, but he missed the child. Another man came up and said, 'Let me try the son of a bitch, I can hit him.' He got down off his horse, kneeled down and fired at the little child, but he missed him too. A third man came up and made a similar remark and fired, and the little fellow dropped." We must do what we can to recapture and try to understand in human terms what it was that was crushed, what it was that was butchered. It is not enough merely to acknowledge that much was lost. So close to total was the human incineration and carnage. A guide to fulfill.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. At least 9 House Democrats have announced that they're not going to show up for the State of the Union address. Got an email this morning from Credo Action and Josh Nelson. They are petitioning this. They've got 120,000 people who've signed their petition. 9 House Democrats have announced that they will not be in attendance tomorrow. Earl Blumenauer, who represents me here in Portland, in Oregon, Pramila Jayapal, Barbara Lee, John Lewis, Gregory Meeks, Jan Schakowsky, Albio Sires, Maxine Waters, and Frederica Wilson. And Rashad Robinson is on the line with us. Rashad is the executive director of Color of Change, colorofchange.org. And you can tweet Rashad at Rashad Robinson or at Color of Change. Rashad, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me back.
It's great to have you. See, you guys are doing what Credo is doing. You're running a petition drive here or an effort to encourage other members of Congress not to show up at the State of the Union address. Do I have that right?
Absolutely. You know, we work really closely with Credo, and when we went out on the campaign some weeks back, we invited our friends at Credo who have joined us and worked with us on a lot of different campaigns. And so we're excited to be both building numbers and momentum. And really this stems from sort of a long-term work since Donald Trump was elected, even before he was elected, at really holding enablers. Those that enable this administration by continuing the status quo, holding them accountable.
Yeah. So how does this work? If somebody goes to the State of the Union, they have the opportunity to do what Joe Wilson did and jump up and yell, "You lie," or something equally undecorous. But I doubt that anybody is going to do that, frankly. But they can also put people in the galleries. They can, arguably make a statement by not standing up. How is not being there a more powerful statement than being there and defying the president?
Well, I think that we need a lot of different types of statements and a lot of folks saying that they're not going to simply go along with the status quo. And we think that this is one of many ways for folks to both resist and oppose this administration. Right after the election, we came out with a set of new strategies where we were going to change what we were doing. At Color of Change, we've been spending years urging the HUD to do different things with, housing and water and lead pipes. We had been urging Department of Justice to do things differently. Well, Donald Trump and his administration showed us exactly who they are. And part of what we're trying to send a message is that these type of events, whether they be the State of the Union, whether they be the inauguration, whether they be these moments where people, quote unquote, come together, you can't come together under false terms. And what we're hoping that members of Congress do is they send a powerful message. And some maybe send a powerful message by bringing dreamers or by bringing folks from Haiti to the galley. And I think that that's going to be important as well. But we do think having folks like John Lewis and others say that they will simply not sit there and stay there during his speech is powerful.
I don't disagree. I agree. And it seems that, or I think that, if they were to be present for something, that might be newsworthy. Is there any talk about these people, for example, organizing a little protest outside the Capitol, or doing a town hall, that could, be put up on social media, or, is there?
Well, there will be an event that, a number of members of Congress, including Congresswoman Jayapal and others, will be speaking at the National Press Club at the same time. And that will be streamed on the Root.com and on Univision. And that will be an event with activists. Color of Change is a partner in that event. And so there will be a number of speakers, leaders, having an alternative State of the Union and really talking about not just the State of the Union as it currently exists, but all the things that we've got to start building and pushing for to have the type of union we all deserve.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Rashad, I wish you the very best in this. If people want to support the effort, I'm assuming go to colorofchange.org?
Absolutely. You can go to colorofchange.org. They can text the word FIGHT to 225568. They can text the word FIGHT to 225568. Follow us on Twitter for updates on the event and ways to engage. And thank you, as always, for having us on and allowing us to share our message.
It is always a pleasure and an honor to have you on, Rashad. Rashad Robinson, the Executive Director of Color of Change, colorofchange.org. You can tweet him at Rashad Robinson or at Color of Change. Rashad, thank you again.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. That's fascinating. We'll see where that goes, and I'm hopeful that something good comes out of it. I think it's very possible. Phil in Simsbury, Connecticut. Hey, Phil, thank you for your patience.
Hey, thanks, Tom. It's great to talk to you. Just wanted to start off with a little background for my question, because I know it's not exactly on topic, but I've been a lifelong Republican. I ran for office as a Republican. I served my town as a Republican. I served in the military, and as a veteran, I was a one-issue voter. I really only cared about how the government can best compensate me for my service. Mm-hmm. And then when I was honorably discharged from the military, I studied law, and I found myself slowly transitioning to more of a classically liberal centrist. I'll say if there's one good thing that came from Donald Trump, it's that it woke up people like me, and it has made me much more progressive leaning than I have ever been. And as a result of him, and thanks to him, that I'm now registered as an unaffiliated voter. So
it's a great step.
One thing that has always got me thinking is mostly stemming from my contemplation of Citizens United. But it's the influence of money on elections. So we know there's a heavy Republican influence by the Koch brothers. And on the flip side, as a Republican, Soros was always painted as the boogeyman. So I was hoping you can shine some light on this for me and kind of contrast the two and their financial influence on both parties.
Sure. I've met George Soros. I've been in the room with him, shall we say, and he is, and I'm on the board of an organization, voqal.org is the website, that helps fund the Democracy Alliance that George Soros has put some money into and through over the years. And I got to tell you, the amount of money coming out of Soros for funding politicians or funding anything is essentially inconsequential. He funds his democracy initiatives around the world, around Europe, and Hungary is particularly upset with him because he's, I believe, Hungarian to begin with. But mostly the phrase George Soros is meta on the alt-right side to rich Jew. That's really what they're saying. And, a rich Jew who is, was not born in the United States. And I think it's just despicable. Soros's influence on democratic politics is, I've never seen any evidence of it, frankly. I mean, he funds some good things about promoting the idea of democracy around the world and here in the United States. But, this is something that Glenn Beck, when he was going off on his anti-Semitic tirades day after day after day, that finally lost him his show on Fox News, in part. He was all over George Soros constantly, and George Soros was getting death threats and all this kind of stuff. And it was just this wild exaggeration. There's no analog to the Koch brothers on the left. I wish there was, Phil. But there's nobody saying, I'm going to put $400 million into the next election. I mean, if George Soros is putting $500,000 into anything, I'm impressed. But, I'm not, tell me about any one thing that you know of that George Soros has done. I'm betting you got nothing, right?
Absolutely. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks a lot, Phil. It's good talking to you, and keep going. And thank you for being so patient with me today. I hope that we can continue the conversation. But I got to run right now. It's coming up on 15 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day, your calls and my thoughts right after this break. And welcome back. Don in Hayward, California. Hey, Don, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Hi there, first-time caller.
Thank you.
There was a caller about the electric cars being not green, and so we have a Chevy Volt, and so I started doing some studies, some research on kind of geeky science, and I found that a car that gets 30 miles a gallon, a regular gas car, the amount of CO2 is coming out to produce the electricity to make my car is half. So, I had to do the therms and the kilowatts and stuff like that.
You're talking about actually manufacturing the car?
No. This is what's coming out of your tailpipe using the gas.
Right.
Okay, on a car that gets 30 miles a gallon, the amount of energy that is produced from that 1 gallon of gas for 30 miles.
Right.
Okay, on an electric car, let's say we have solar panels, so it's kind of moot.
Right.
Gas turbines, to make electricity is half of the CO2s are coming out of that power plant.
Well, that's interesting. So why don't we just make all of our cars like freight locomotives, where freight locomotives have a diesel engine, but the diesel engine does nothing more than turn a generator, which in turn charges batteries and turns the electric motors in the wheels of the freight engine.
Well, yeah, but what people are saying is that an electric car is not green because it took fossil fuels to make it.
Right.
They just think that we should have already flipped over to electricity only before we made this cars. Which,
I see. Yeah.
It's kind of backwards.
Yeah, no, there's got to be a transition period. It's just you want to make it as short as possible once you realize that the technology that we're using is killing us all, or has the potential to kill us all.
Yeah, so what I was doing was I just said, if we didn't have solar panels on our car, is my Volt actually economically better, because I know the power plant is making electricity. So I did the therms to kilowatt transitions and found some really nice stuff, on the internet, do some research on it.
Yeah, so are you saying essentially, Dan, or Don, I'm sorry, that a gallon of gas in your Chevy Volt takes you 60 miles instead of 30? Is that what you're saying?
No. When I charge our car up, let's say we didn't have solar panels. Okay, the power plant is making electricity through natural gas.
Right.
Okay, so the natural gas is produced to make that 15 kilowatts of electricity that's in a volt. To charge it to do the range is 53 miles. Normally we get anywhere for up to 60. Sometimes we might go down to 50 during the winter time.
Sure. But
it's been right around that 55, 58 miles on a charge all the time. And so a 30 gallon gas engine car produces 19 pounds of CO2.
Okay.
Okay, we can go 60 miles roughly on our volt by the power that's
because the centralized gas-fired power plants are so much more efficient than individual car internal combustion engines.
Right, and we're also not talking about the stuff and we're also not talking about the stuff that's coming out of the gas engine tailpipe.
Right.
You know, arsenic and all this other stuff.
Right, which is
benzene, things like that.
Right, which is captured with the power plant, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, one last thing. Before you became vegan, did you ever have lutefisk as a fellow Norwegian?
Yeah, my grandmother used to make it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I never had it. But
it was awful.
Just,
I had that as a kid when I was a little kid. Yeah, just boiled to death whitefish. Don, thanks a lot for the call. Great to hear from you. We'll be right back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Richard in Los Angeles. Hey, Richard, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thank you. Obviously, President Trump was successful in getting Andrew McCabe to resign or step down.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. So that, in all probability, he can replace him with one of his toadies.
Exactly. But what I'm worried about, Tom, we're the same age, and I was born and raised in California, and I'm a Democrat. But this Devin Nunes, my God, what a disgusting traitor! This guy is. What do you think is going to happen with his those secret memos?
Yeah, Devin Nunes
have any success?
He has played this masterfully. He represents California, doesn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, he's from. I'm not sure what the district is, but there's a real effort. I think there's 17 or 19 Republicans who are representing California in a big effort to get rid of all of them. But in any case, this is just brilliant. He writes a memo, or he has his staff write a memo that says whatever kind of propaganda he wants to say. Puts a complete spin on and selective, cherry picks the intelligence information and comes up with this little memo that says, basically, when we give this to Fox News, everybody's head's going to explode. And then he in the background helps start a campaign with a hashtag, release the memo. Then the right-wing media comes in on it and says, yeah, release the memo. And so now it's like, people have forgotten that Devin Nunes actually wrote the memo or was responsible for the creation of it, for the very memo that he's now saying, get it out. I mean, it's brilliant. If I could write an op-ed, which is essentially what this memo is, and instead of publishing it on an alternate or something, I could get millions and millions of people to tweet, release the op-ed, release the memo. I'm amazed.
But Tom,
and I'm amazed that the media has fallen for it, frankly. I mean, I get it. Fox News and right-wing hate radio has been pushing it like there's no tomorrow. But that doesn't mean that the mainstream media needs to jump on that bandwagon.
Well, and also I heard that they purposely omitted the FISA application, which would explain almost all of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like I said, he's cherry picking stuff, but we don't know what's in it, and frankly, I don't want to give it that much more oxygen. But Richard, excellent question. Thank you, Michael in Bronx, New York. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Tom?
Good. What's on your mind?
What's on my mind besides my hair? Well, I was very intrigued by the email that you had from.
Oh, Michael vanished. Lou in Pueblo, Colorado. Hey, Lou, what's on your mind?
Hey, good morning. Glad to hear you. I was just wanted to comment a bit on, talking versus action, and to simply talk about it. Talking without action is like regulation without enforcement. It feels good, but it doesn't get anything accomplished.
Right.
Last week, after listening to you and poking around and thinking on my own, I sent off emails to the DSCC or DSSC and the DNC saying that, effectively they've abandoned the United States and they're never going to see another dime from me until they become the party that preserves and expands the policies of FDR and LBJ, and that, if all they're going to do is try and grab a hold of the money the Republicans have now, I might as well vote Republican. So then I went a step further and I contacted the Congressional Progressive Caucus.
Right.
Which I'm glad to see Pocan's just been moved to the top of that. That's great.
Yeah, he and Raul Grijalva are the co-chairs.
Well, I wrote Grijalva, and what I've asked them, and then after I wrote them, I found it actually on their website. What I want to find out is the names and contact information of actual progressive candidates. And I'm going to, the money that I was giving to the DNC. Oh, and incidentally, I'm Fred Cadillhopper on Trump, so we're related. We're both Freds.
Okay.
But what I'm going to do, I'm going to contribute my money directly to progressive candidates. I don't really give a damn if they're from my district or not, because they're supporting what I believe in. And I don't want to see any of my money going to consultants and corporate TV to support corporate. A corporate Democrat is only good compared to an oligarch Republican.
Yeah.
Compared to anyone else, they're a loser.
Well, and they're losing election. I mean, we've just seen the Democratic Party ever since it embraced neoliberalism in the early '90s just wither in many regards, which is really, really tragic. I think though that the Democratic Party is making a really, really substantial comeback. And Lou, a great place to start. I mean, I think there's almost 100 members, maybe a little over 100 members of the Progressive Congressional Caucus. There's some good progressives in Congress, and that caucus is a great place to start. I mean, if you want to support individual members of Congress who are already in office, you could just look at the membership list of the progressive.
That's what I said. Yeah, I want all the listeners to know they can go to the CPC website, and everybody is listed there who's a progressive.
That's right.
You would spend more than you're spending now if you sent $1 to each of them, probably.
Yeah. I think it's on Raul Grijalva's website, too, isn't it? Like grijalva.house.gov, and then it's a subset of that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Lou, thanks. Thanks for listening to Sirius XM, too. We'll be back in just a minute.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
More of your calls in the news of the day after this. The Thom Hartmann University Book Club today, we're reading from the Strip and Flip Selection, as opposed to Election, of 2016, 5 Jim Crows and Electronic Election Theft by Bob Fitrakis and Harvey Wasserman. This is from the chapter Part 1, page 15, Strip. The foundation of election theft is the manipulation of race as a divide and conquer strategy. It began with the first Jim Crow chattel slavery. Slavery in various forms has existed since the dawn of time, but in the colonies of British North America and then in the United States, it took on a uniquely virulent incarnation. Chattel slavery was, of course, a horrific, brutal labor system designed primarily in the American South to power a network of plantations that produced cotton, tobacco, indigo, rice, and other hot weather crops that could be grown in large fields. But it had a larger purpose here. Our peculiar institution, how the founders referred to slavery, was meant to divide black laborers from white in a caste system that would guarantee that they would never unite in rebellion. As we'll see, this originated with the infamous Bacon's Rebellion of 1675 in Virginia, in which indentured servants of both races joined forces. Plantation owners vowed to make sure that that never happened again. When the United States became an independent country, plantation owners also vowed to secure political benefits from their slaves. Thus, they wrote into the Constitution the 3/5 clause that gave slave owners additional representation for their slaves, even though those slaves could not vote. That additional vote count guaranteed that every president from Jefferson to Lincoln either owned slaves or his vice president did, and that the Congress was strongly controlled by slave owners right up to the outbreak of the Civil War. After the Civil War, with formal slavery abolished, a Jim Crow system of racial segregation overtook the South. Enforced by the Democratic Party and its Ku Klux Klan terror wing, white landowners updated the realities of slavery to again keep blacks and whites apart. The roots of racism since 1865 has been the treatment of legally freed African Americans as something less than human, guaranteeing all whites a sense of superiority and an economic leg up. When the populist and socialist movements that campaigned most powerfully from the 1880s to the 1920s worked to overcome this separation, they were hammered by the court and electoral systems through a series of stolen elections and twisted race-based legal decisions, and the fusion of the Democratic and Republican parties in the 1917 municipal races in the Northeast. Confirmed by the Supreme Court in the 1890s, this updated Jim Crow caste system again guaranteed that blacks in the South and parts of the North would not be allowed to vote, and that they would be carefully divided from whites by caste as well as class. Since 1970, the primary weapon for suppressing the minority vote has been the third Jim Crow, the drug war. In the tradition of Bacon's Rebellion and the populist socialist upheavals, blacks and whites once again began to unite during the civil rights and anti-war movements of the 1950s and 60s. In response, Richard Nixon's Republican Party invoked the divide and conquer war on drugs. Confronted with the liberalization of the Southern Democratic Party, Nixon feared that black votes might remake America's political map. In Republican eyes, there was only one solution: disenfranchise the African American population, along with young and Latino voters who were leaning strongly to the left. In 1972, Nixon pointedly ignored a powerful report from his own Blue Ribbon Schaefer Commission on drug use and escalated the attack on marijuana and other drugs. In the 45 years since, a staggering 41 million Americans have been arrested for pot or other controlled substances. That's a number of human beings that exceeds the populations of more than 150 other countries worldwide. It has left the United States with the largest prison population in the history of the modern world, while having little or no impact on the actual use of drugs. As Michelle Alexander has shown in her landmark book, The New Jim Crow, the majority of those incarcerated have been black and Latino, with a devastating impact on our elections. Millions of these mostly young, mostly male citizens have been stripped of their right to vote, as well as their ability to maintain families, obtain work, and meaningfully participate in the political lives of their communities. All this has been by design. Once again, a new Jim Crow policy has been delegated by a ruling elite to strip our non-white population of its ability to exercise its fair share of power in our electoral process and to unite with whites in political action. In the 1890s, rising industrial interests committed the nation to a fourth Jim Crow, a course of race-based global empire. The U.S. already had a history of foreign intervention, dating to Thomas Jefferson's 1803 use of our fledgling Navy to fight pirates along the coast, the shores of Tripoli, of what's now called Libya. That was followed by the conquest of the North American continent with genocidal warfare used against the indigenous peoples who had lived here for 20,000 years. By the 1890s, when the frontier consumed, America's giant corporations began to expand overseas. They started with Hawaii, a constitutional monarchy, and then pushed into Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines, and beyond. And in all cases, these interventions involved the white-ruled U.S. interfering with the political systems of non-white countries. In discussing this fourth Jim Crow, we include an extensive, though not complete, list of these interventions. It underscores the reality that our own political system has become an imperial juggernaut with the inevitable blowback bound to obliterate any residual pretense to real democracy at home. Generally, there's been an attempt to portray these interventions as benign, meant to bring democracy, progress, and the Christian faith to third world nations. In fact, they've been largely economic in purpose, a dollar democracy to grab other people's resources. The strip and flip selection of 2016 any place you Welcome back. Michael in Bronx, New York. Hey, Michael, you want to try it again?
Hey, can you hear me now?
I hear you now, yes. What's up?
Beautiful. Besides my hair, what's up is I was intrigued by the emails that you have read, and kudos to your handle being Fred Flintstone. Big yabba dabba do for you. Nonetheless, when Trump says we got the firefighters, we got the police officers, I can go on and on, but what got me is the fact of Trump using our military, using the police, trying to use the FBI for his own political and, at times, organized crime agenda.
Yeah, and this was a fundraising letter.
A fundraising letter, but I heard Michelle Jawando on another talk show discussing when Mr. Trump tried to fire Mueller, and she says that these investigators, like the police officers, like the military, you go into civil service, they take an oath, and the oath is to be loyal to the laws and the Constitution of the United States. Right. It does not in any way, shape, or form mention of being loyal to any one particular individual, and certainly not Trump. So there's serious problems when it comes to the charges of obstruction of justice, which I think is really going to prove here. And it also goes to show how there are those in office using the police to carry out their racist or sexist agenda. You know, we can go back to the days of Rudy Giuliani here in New York City. We can even go back to the days down in, I forgot the name of the town, Virginia, that was so sexist, and where you had the name Lorena Bobbitt come up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I remember. I remember the story. So the bottom line for you, Michael, is you're just observing this kind of tribalism that Trump is promoting in U.S. politics. That's basically what you're saying.
And I'm also saying to all those that took the oath, remember the oath that you took. Right. And not to be, I don't want to use the word suckered, but don't be duped into doing something that you know doggone well is wrong and against the law just because somebody, quote, gave you the order. Because guess what? When you know what hits the fan, it'll be you that be thrown under the bus and not the person that is giving you that sort of rhetoric. You would really have to prove in court, and not saying that it's not impossible if you look back to the case of, say, Arizona v. Ford, that the person rhetoric is the one that pulled the trigger.
Right. Yeah. Good points all. Michael, thank you for the call. Coach Glenn in State College, Pennsylvania. Hey, Glenn, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I'm getting solar on my roof next month, and was a little confused about how it worked. Mm-hmm. And it just seemed kind of confusing. They had people coming through the neighborhood. I had a couple of different people come and talk to me about solar, and I was interested because we have a new home with a new roof. And so here's how it works, because I got it simplified in my head where I can understand it. I'm not buying solar. I'm not even leasing the equipment. What I'm doing is agreeing under contract to buy power from this company that's putting the solar panels on my roof for about 14 cents a kilowatt hour now. I'm paying 27 to the power company. So it's about 30-something percent less. Last month it would have saved me $104.
So basically the sales pitch is, we will sell you electricity for less than you're paying for it right now. We just have to put our electric generating plant on your roof.
Exactly. It's kind of how it works. And they pay me because last month I would have gotten $104 credit off, well, or more than I would have paid. So I paid X amount of dollars. It would have saved me $104 last month by having the solar up there, and it's fully transferable. They check your roof out and everything. If you need a new roof, they take it off, you put a new roof on, and then they put it back on.
Sure.
After 20 years of the lease, you can have it removed, or you can buy out whatever the value is left, or at any time during the lease, you can buy out based on a third-party, non-connected person's estimate.
Right.
So it's a pretty good deal.
Excellent.
Win-win.
Excellent stuff. Glenn, thanks for the information. Good to hear from you. Francesca in Burbank, California. Hey, Francesca, what's up?
Well, I just tuned in, late to the program. At the same time, I turned on Twitter, so I thought I better call your screener and see if this has been covered since you started this morning. And your screener said no, so here it is. Mitch McConnell has scheduled a vote on the 20-week abortion ban for tonight. That vote is happening in the Senate tonight. NARAL has been sending out tweets with a telephone number through which anybody can get connected to their senators.
Can you give us that number, Francesca?
I can give it to you, and where do you need it posted?
Well, just tell us, and feel free to post it on our blog on our homepage at thomhartmann.com, or to tweet it to me, and I'll retweet it. But
I'll tweet it to you after I do it.
Okay.
This is the NARAL number to call before tonight for the 20-week abortion ban vote. 1-866-665-4470.
Okay.
866-665-4470. And if you can't find it, go to Twitter, use their search bar, punch in NARAL, and you'll find the tweet.
Right.
And I'll tweet it to you right now, and look where to post it on your blog. I've never done that.
It's just on our homepage. There's a blog there, and it has comments enabled, and you just comment on it. I'm guessing that the odds are this. Well, actually, I don't know. Do you think this might pass, or is this an attempt by the Republicans to just crank up their base?
We'll never know, will we, until it happens.
Yeah, I guess so.
I can't second guess anybody anymore.
Yeah.
I just can't.
That's amazing. Thank you, Francesca. I missed that. You're right. In fact, we talked about it last week, but and I knew that the vote was going to be coming up, but I didn't catch that it was happening tonight.
I
Thank
didn't
you
know
very
till 30 seconds till I called your show, but thank you. Thanks for hearing me.
Thanks, Francesca. Great talking with you. Justin in Ravenna, Ohio. Hey, Justin, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
So I heard about the deputy director of the FBI stepped down.
Right, Neil McCabe.
But I also heard about this
Andrew McCabe.
4-page memo, and I was a little bit confused about exactly what that is. I was tuning into some of the mainstream media, and they were talking about how it was circulating in the House. And then they started talking about how they should not be focusing on it, and they started talking about Russia. So I just kind of wanted to know exactly,
yeah, so here's what happened.
Is it a big deal, or?
Here's what happened. Devin Nunes, who is I believe he's the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, received a bunch of intelligence information from the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security. Had some of his staff people basically slice and dice that information, which includes some stuff that's classified information. Sliced and diced it into a memo that apparently, from the reports that I'm seeing, suggests that Rod Rosenstein, the number 2 guy at Department of Justice, is a bad guy. Has done something wrong, and that there's some kind of conspiracy within the federal government to bring down Donald Trump. The FBI and the Justice Department are saying, "Hey, wait a minute! If you release this memo, you are releasing classified information." They haven't, as far as I know, explicitly called out Devin Nunes for misusing the information, for putting information out in a way that implies something that is not true. But that seems to be the general sentiment. On this program last Wednesday, Congressman Mark Pocan, a Democrat, in fact, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, explicitly, just came right out and said, "I have read the memo." He apparently, you can read. I think he's on the Intelligence Committee also, and he said, this memo is, crap. That's not the word he used, but I don't remember his exact words. And he said, so he's actually calling for the memo to be released because he thinks that it will backfire on Nunes
that it will show what a partisan and how this guy is willing to damage the intelligence infrastructure of the United States for purely partisan purposes and to suck up to Donald Trump. So, we'll see. And so Nunes writes his own memo, and then he starts running around going, Nunes can't release the memo. You need to force him to release the memo. And so Right-Wing Hate Radio took this, and all over the country, you've got these poor dupes who listen to these programs going, oh, wow, we got to release the memo. And it became a Twitter hashtag, and it's all over Facebook and stuff like that. And then the Russian bots got in on it, and, on Twitter and Facebook promoting release the memo, and it became a thing. And now the media is talking about it. But this is just a, Devin Nunes scam. It's like when he went over to the White House and got a memo from them and then left one night and the next morning called basically a press conference saying, oh, my God, I got this amazing piece of information. I've got to get it into the White House. And, of course, the White House had given it to him to begin with. And that turned into such a circus that Nunes basically backed away from his own committee for a little while. It's just, this guy does this kind of stuff. It's a stunt. And a stunt that, according to the Department of Justice and Homeland Security and the FBI, a stunt that could damage our intelligence services for no purpose other than trying to make our intelligence services look bad. And when the Republican Party became the Hate the FBI Party, I don't know, but I'm just blown away by this. Because, it's like I always thought the FBI and the Republican Party were pretty well, stitched together. But apparently it's like the wheels are coming off. So, Justice, that's what I know about it. So, anyhow, thanks a lot for the call. It's coming up on 15 minutes before the hour. What a fascinating day. There's been no collusion whatsoever, says Donald Trump, the Chiron on NBC right now. Remarkable. We'll see where this all goes. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls and the news of the day right after this. And welcome back. Arthur in Davie, Florida. Hey, Arthur, you're on the air. What's on your mind?
Yes, I would like to shout loudly and proudly about the event that occurred in Florida. It was notated on the front page of the Miami Herald just a few days ago. Tens of thousands of people have gathered signatures to the tune of over 1 million signatures to put an amendment on to the state constitution that will appear this November. It's the restoration of voting rights for felons. And I'd also like to give a lot of credit to the ACLU, an organization that I've belonged to and have respect for many a year. They put over $1.5 million into this. Florida is one of the 4 states that has this law, this onerous law that makes a felon, after they've done their time, to wait 5 to 7 years before they ever get the right to vote again. And I just think it's absurd.
Yeah, I agree. Well said. So do you think this is going to pass?
Oh, yes, because we got over 1 million votes, and we only needed around 800,000. And I think pretty much everybody that I went to get something signed, they said, let me add it, because there are some restrictions. It won't allow a person that's committed murder or a heinous sexual act to have their voting rights restored.
Yeah.
But other than that, there's many people that are in prison, really, or have been convicted that are really innocent.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, I mean, why does imprisonment or post-imprisonment disqualify a person from voting? I mean, in Europe, people vote in the prisons. You're still a citizen. You should still have some say in your democracy. I mean, it's this instinct that we have in the United States that goes back to the post-slavery days, back to Reconstruction, to look for ways to deprive people of the vote is obscene. It's just obscene, and the rest of the world considers it absurd. Arthur, thank you. Thanks for sharing that with us. Ann in Sugar Grove, North Carolina. Hey, Ann, what's up?
Hi, good afternoon, or morning for you, afternoon here in North Carolina. The man who called in about the correspondence dinner where Trump, was just fuming in the audience.
Yeah, I was there.
I watched it on C-SPAN, and that's where he can go to cspan.org and just plug it in their search engine. You can find anything on C-SPAN. It's where I go. It's right next to for me, I watch that along with Free Speech TV and Link TV. But speaking of the abortion issue, while you guys were on break, I flipped over to C-SPAN, the Senate, and I thought, they're waiting for a Senate to speak? What's this about? And there was the title, abortion. And now, what's her name? Joni Ernst. Oh, my gosh. She's
Republican
just
of
going
Iowa.
on. And she's just going on and on and on. It's really scary what they're doing. It's really, really scary.
Well, this is the slicing and dicing of the American electorate.
The guy that, go ahead.
I said this is the slicing and dicing of the American electorate. They're reaching out to the Pentecostal vote and the Catholic vote.
Oh yeah, well, there's a child that lived to be, was born early at 20 weeks, and now he's 5 years old, and she's just got big pictures,
Yeah.
And it's just
no, technology has advanced tremendously. That's true, but
right, exactly. But not everybody waits to 20 weeks. They really just
no. In fact, it's a very, very small percentage. It's a single-digit percentage of abortions, and they almost always have to do with serious malformations of the fetus, or the risk of the mother dying. And I got to run. Thanks. Hartmann here with you. Our quote for the day from Angela Davis: prisons do not disappear social problems. They disappear human beings. This is apropos of the Republican efforts in Oklahoma to look for women who are pregnant and drinking alcohol and immediately imprison them. Prisons do not disappear social problems. They disappear human beings. Homelessness, unemployment, drug addiction, mental illness, and illiteracy are only a few of the problems that disappear from public view when the human beings contending with them are relegated to cages. Brilliant. Brilliant. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, not too much, Tom. I wanted to make a comment about the language used by opponents of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of weeks ago, you used the term of art, so I know you know what it means.
Mm-hmm.
But ironically, I was reading a white paper by a colonel at the DIA about how we should force China and Russia to use quote-unquote Western terms of art when referring to like the Spratly Islands in the South China Sea.
Right.
He said we should reject the term 6-line. That's what China uses, or 9-line, the 9-line. But anyways, I've noticed with opponents of the Black Lives Matter, they rarely ever say, as a matter of fact, I've never had one tell me that they're annoyed by the movement. They always say that they're militant and they're terrorists. They're almost using terms of art that we, the United States, adopted in this war on terror.
Right.
And it really disturbs me because, you can oppose the Black Lives Matter and you can mischaracterize them, but they're still Americans, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yep.
They are not enemy combatants.
Well, and I would say that I would go way beyond that. The Black lives should matter in the United States, and unfortunately, for most of the history of this country, in fact, arguably for all of the history of this country, they have not, or at least they have not relative to white lives. And this isn't an attempt, just like with feminism 30, 40 years ago, you've got white men who a small subset of white men, or probably a substantial subset of white men who viewed feminism. In fact, Donald Trump repeated this in his interview with Piers Morgan that was played yesterday. It was when he was in Davos. Where he said, "No, I'm not a feminist because I'm in favor of both men and women." Well, that's what feminism is it's in favor of both men and women. So bring us all together here. Black Lives Matter is seeking equality. They're not seeking superiority. It's not the modern incarnation of the black version of the white supremacist movement. It's not that at all. And but that's how the white supremacists want to portray it. It's how the right wing wants to portray it. It's a real tragedy. Dave, thank you for the call, and your point is well taken. Elizabeth in Farmington, Michigan. Hey, Elizabeth, what's up?
Hey, hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I had called in during the solar panel, the cost of running a car discussion, and it made me think of a documentary and book that I heard about recently. Wondered if you knew anything about it, called Unacknowledged.
I don't. I'm not familiar.
Oh, wow. I wish you would check into it and let us know your thoughts on it once you have. It has to do with the technology that was gained from the various landings out west from extraterrestrial flights.
Oh, really?
Yes, and it was re-engineered, and by the 50s we knew of a way to provide energy to the entire world for free, and we would never have gotten into this global warming situation at all, but it was greed and money, the petrodollars, that kept it from being exposed. And according to this documentary, anyway, that's why I'd love to hear your views on it. According to the documentary, each set of presidents, since Eisenhower's time, and that's what he was really warning us about, the military-industrial complex. They were going to keep this technology secret. It's electromagnetic energy.
I'm not sure we need aliens to come up with technology that can power the world. I mean, we've got solar, we've got wind, we've got wave power. There's lots and lots of energy sources out there. But
sure, but what's unacknowledged is the fact that they've kept it silent.
Yeah, no, I got it. You've done a fine job of promoting it. I'll check it out. Elizabeth, thank you for the call. Wyatt in St. Clairsville, Ohio. Hey, Wyatt, what's up?
Not too much, Tom. How you doing?
Good.
Hey, got we're talking about the oil and gas industry, and I've worked in the oil and gas industry about the past 15 years, and it's provided I'm union. It's provided a very good living for me. And sometimes I feel like people demonize the industry more so out of just kind of ill-informed on.
Well, here's the deal, Wyatt. The oil and gas industry is destroying the planet. Wouldn't you feel just as good about making the same pay, or maybe even better pay, installing solar panels or building windmills?
Well, I mean, I understand that, but I mean, I think there are a lot of people out there that, they're protesting things that they don't, like, for instance, you be working on a river, we directional drill rivers and put the pipe underneath there, and, somebody be protesting that pipeline going across there, but right behind them there'd be a barge going down the river, I mean, I feel like sometimes people just don't really know what they're talking about, and that's what gets, kind of people switched around on things, and we're working out here in West Virginia. There's a big, Utica Shale, Marcellus Shale, and all that is a big thing out here, and I see these oil and gas industries, they don't just go in there and just, deprive the whole area and rape it for everything that it is. We're in there, we're building new roads into these places. People look back in there that, it's a two-track.
Wyatt, question for you. Have you seen, Wyatt, have you seen Josh Fox's documentary, Gasland?
Gasland, yes, sir, I have.
What do you think?
I think I think it's misrepresented a lot.
Oh, okay.
A little bit. I've worked in the industry for 15 years.
Yeah, I got it.
I don't work.
Wyatt, I got to run. I'm sorry, but you made your point. The poor misunderstood gas and oil industry. Anyhow. We'll see. Check out the vote in the Senate tonight on the 20-week abortion ban. Tomorrow is the State of the Union address. We'll be talking about that. What is our State of the Union tomorrow? And, of course, Wednesday we'll check that out and also check out Joe Kennedy's critique of it. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy requires you. It's not a spectator sport. Get out there, get active, tag. You're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com.